Welcome back to the Parliamentary Channel's live coverage of the House of Assembly members debating the National Training Agency bill. Heard from the mover of that bill, Minister of Labor, Golden Gates MP Shane Gibson. And we also heard from the seconder, Cleola Hamilton, the MP for South Beach. And we also heard from the member for Long Island, Loretta Butler Turner. She's with the Free National Movement, saying that everything sounds good, but it's really a duplication of what they did, they meaning the FNM, with the BTVI bill and the apprenticeship bill. Well, again, the government disagrees. That is not the case. We also heard from the member for Marathon, the Minister of Education, Science and Technology, Jerome Fitzgerald, who took great pains to explain, listen, this is about a national training agency. This isn't about one training institution. Let's listen to the person who moved the bill this morning. That's the Minister of Labor, who has legal oversight for the National Training Agency, which, by the way, will be headed by the former South Beach MP, Agatha Marcel. This is Minister Shane Gibson.
Somebody told me the other day, somebody they had the choice to hire two companies, and one was substantially more than the other one. And so when they looked at the reputation of the one that costs more, they said, listen here, I'm in my nice house, I'm going to hire this company who I know will keep the surrounding clean. Once they finish the end of the day, it wouldn't be garbage all over the place. So let me pay a couple of extra dollars because I know the kind of quality work I'll be getting around my nice house. Of course, after the first day, Mr. Speaker, the workers left and left all of the wood thrown all over the place, garbage all in, and this is a nice finished home. You know, and when it was raised to the workers, they didn't see the big deal. You know, when they left a couple of things, we know we can pick it up tomorrow. You know, but the point is, the only thing that separates us from any other country, Mr. Speaker, is the type of service that we provide. I don't think there are many things you could find here in the Bahamas that you couldn't find basically in some other country in the world. You know, and I told the story the other day when I went to Germany, and you could feel good customer service. Now I know persons would have had bad experiences everywhere they went, but this happens to this one particular place I went. You felt the service, and you felt welcome, and you didn't mind spending your money because of the type of service that you were being given. And so for most cases, Mr. Speaker, you know, the thing is, the attitude of the workers is that, man, listen here, I could provide a service bad today on this job because I just have to go tomorrow and find another job. You know, and so what we're trying to do is to change that type of attitude where we can make them functional properly and be able to guarantee the kind of competence that they need in order to get and to keep jobs, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the government and established the National Training Agency recognizes the importance of the agency being stakeholder-driven. You know, I remember when we were first establishing the urban renewal, and you looked at other programs that they had in the city and other parts in the outskirts as well, where persons would go and they would provide assistance and clean up. The next day, the stuff would be right back there again. You know, and then with urban renewal, we decided, listen now, we have to keep the stakeholders involved in the entire process. And so the residents, the people who live in the community, the churches, the civil organizations, those who are part of the community, you made them a part of the process and you saw the difference, rather than it being driven by the government. So when the government is out of office and stakeholders have no interest, of course the program goes along with them. But once you put programs, that's why even in Golden Gates, Mr. Speaker, I tell them in Golden Gates, listen here, I don't want to be spearheading anything in Golden Gates. I want the residents, I will give you all the support you need. I want the residents to spearhead it. So even when I'm no longer a member, these programs continue. But too often we like to put the government out in the front, we want to put individuals out in the front, and when those individuals are no longer there, then the program goes along with them. And so that is why it is important, Mr. Speaker, in the case of the National Training Agency, we included all of the stakeholders to make sure that they have a stake and they understand that they have a stake in what we are trying to accomplish. And we had them to understand, listen, we cannot do it without you. And so it was important for us to facilitate the cooperation between employees and employers, organizations, business communities, training institutions and programs and trainees. And of course, what would this program be without including urban renewal? I think the thing is, when you look at the urban renewal centers out there, they understand the dynamics of what's happening in all of these various communities. And so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have these community centers so they're already. They're already involved in lots in the community. And so it's only up to us to tap into the resources that currently exist and allow us to see how we could help to enhance it, or we could complement one another. The Speaker of the National Training Agency's functions will include providing leadership and structure for the development of industry-standardized, competency-based training, providing the organized framework for the delivery of industry-based competency training. It'll be facilitating workforce readiness and expanding the opportunity for increased job placement. The successful administration of the National Training Agency's functions will make possible the achievement of some critical national training objectives, which include increasing the capacity of individuals to participate in the workforce, promoting, identifying, and developing industry standards of occupations and training programs, providing a national certification framework, Mr. Speaker. That's important because, you know, when I look, for instance, at all of the workers that are imported into the Bahamas every year, and Mr. Speaker, I must say this as well, because I think it'll be ridiculous for anybody to think that the Bahamas could survive without foreign laborers, without foreign workers. Cannot happen. Cannot happen. We need foreign investment, and we need foreign laborers in certain instances, Mr. Speaker. When you look at the transfer of knowledge and transfer of skills, I mean, we have to admit that we don't operate at the highest possible standard. I don't think any country, but each country has some individuals who operate at the highest standards in certain industries. And so where we could use those individuals, bring them to the Bahamas, have the transfer of knowledge, transfer of skills, to better train and equip locals to take advantage of future opportunities, Mr. Speaker, then we should do so. You know, and where we can have Bahamians who are trained just as other nationals are trained to go to other countries. Bahamians trained and certified to go to other countries, but you can't do it unless you have a program and a certification process that is not only recognized here in the Bahamas, but recognized globally, Mr. Speaker. And case in point is what happens in Grand Bahama. I mean, they bring in hundreds of individuals every year in the shipyard who have certain qualifications and welding. Now, granted, today, we have more qualified welders today than we had some years ago who went through a training program locally in Grand Bahama, but we don't have all of the qualified welders and the technical persons that we need to work at the shipyard. And so we still have to continue to bring persons. Now, our goal is to see how we could make sure and we train as many Bahamians as possible to take advantage of these opportunities, Mr. Speaker. But the reality is sometimes it is seasonal. And so you may find that because of the good season here in the Bahamas, that you need X amount of welders, with, whether it's underwater welding or some other specialty welding here in the Bahamas, and 6 months from now, you may need those same trainers in Panama or Honduras. And so Bahamians have to not only be willing to be trained, but they have to be willing to get the exposure and the travel and to move away from home for short and long periods of time. You hear too often where persons, they don't want to leave home. As a matter of fact, not only do they don't want to leave the Bahamas, sometimes they don't want to leave Nassau to go work in one of the family islands. If you look at what's happening right now in Bimini, I spoke to somebody in Bimini last night. They said every possible building you could rent is occupied in Bimini right now. Everyone. Everybody in Bimini right now who want a job will perhaps be able to get a job. And so it will require individuals from other islands be willing to transfer to Bimini to work. But the question is, are they willing to go? I mean, when they had the Four Seasons in Exuma, you had a high turnover of employees because, granted, in some instances, employees wasn't comfortable with the arrangements. They thought it was going under one arrangement and ended up being another. I'm not speaking about a category. I'm speaking about a category of employees who say, man, I can't be away from Nassau any longer. I got to go back home. And so they take a job in Exuma, right? And then they decide after 2 or 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, I can't take Exuma, I got to go back to Nassau, right? Where you have some foreign nationals who they come from all the way in the Philippines, Portugal, where all over the world. They come and they live here forever. They don't have a difficulty adjusting.
That was Minister Shane Gibson presenting this morning, moving the bill for this National Training Agency. Let's go upstairs now, joining members as they prepare for this afternoon's session.
This morning we were debating second reading and committal of the following bill, a bill for an act to establish the National Training Agency to develop a competency-based training and job placement system and for connected purposes. We had the move of the bill was the honorable member for Golden Gates. We've had several speakers thus far, and the chair will now recognize the member for Pine Ridge to begin his communication. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Pine Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. Today I rise in support of the National Training Agency Bill 2013, which seeks to establish a national training agency as an independent entity with the purpose of developing competency-based training and job placement systems in the Bahamas, which is crucial going forward for this administration and is a part of our job creation plan. But before making my brief remarks, Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I would like to once again thank the great people of Pine Ridge for this opportunity to serve them as their Member of Parliament and to assure them that I am fully committed to representing them wholeheartedly in this honorable place. Mr. Speaker, in the Freeport News on Tuesday, June the 25th, there was an article on the front page which read as follows: "Unacceptable campaign group attacks Grand Bahamas lack for fire station and number of working hydrants." I would just like to say a few words as it relates to this and to assure the residents of Grand Bahama that the plans for the proposed fire station have been vetted through the various different departments and now with the Ministry of Works. And very shortly, the residents of Grand Bahama will begin to see action where there would actually be a shovel to the ground and this long-awaited fire station will be implemented on the island of Grand Bahama. In the Minister for National Security and the Honorable Member for Baines and Grandstown, he showed this Parliament the pictures of the 2 fire trucks that are already on Grand Bahama, and the fire station will begin in short order. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the residents and the business community of Grand Bahama for their support and for their collaboration with the Ministry for Grand Bahama over the last year. Because of their support, much of the preparatory work needed to implement many of the government policies going forward are now completed, and we should see fruits of our labor in this fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, today I am delighted to stand with my colleagues and to thank the member for Golden Isles for bringing this revolutionary, I said revolutionary, Golden Gates, for this revolutionary bill to this honorable place. It's okay if I use it. Which would facilitate the increase of the quality of training across the Bahamas and the number of Bahamians who will be active and effective in the workplace as a result of this piece of legislation. Mr. Speaker, in an attempt to put a dent in the high levels of unemployment that resulted from the loss of jobs and staff cuts during the brunt of the global economic crisis, the former administration introduced the National Training Program, one that was very similar to what we're dealing with today, but it was not a piece of legislation. However, that program, which according to the former Minister of Labor and Social Development, the Honorable Dion Folks, was originally designed to train 1,000 Bahamian workers in such fields as engine repair, landscaping, accounting, computer application, construction, and was eventually used, in my view, as a political ploy in an attempt to buy votes, which failed miserably. Consequently, the government spent an additional $28 million more than was initially intended to fund the program, and at the end of the 52 weeks, the majority of the residents who were involved in this program on Grand Bahama were sent back to the unemployment lines because, in my view, the training component of the program failed because it was disorganized, it was disjointed, it was thrown together with no planning. What we're doing today is to bring planning to training, and this bill deals with that issue. Mr. Speaker, all indications point to the need for this administration to lay the framework for a proper training and development of our workforce. In our Charter of Governance, this administration promised to create jobs for Bahamians. However, we can only satisfy this commitment to job creation if we equip Bahamians with the necessary skills, competencies, and certifications to meet the present and future demand of our diversifying economy. Mr. Speaker, my colleague minister, the Member of Parliament for Pinewood, in an article dated November the 20th, 2010, addressed the needs for the Bahamas to enact comprehensive and extensive national training program to ensure that Bahamians receive skills and education necessary to become more marketable and therefore to secure meaningful employment. Yes. Pinewood.
He was then president of the Chamber of Commerce.
He was then president of the Chamber of Commerce, and so he was talking about this long in advance, hitting on the former administration to really move in the direction we're heading in today. Therefore, these words clearly describe the fundamental purpose for the need for the National Training Agency in the Bahamas, which this bill seeks to establish. Mr. Speaker, according to a report entitled "The Cost Effectiveness of National Training Systems in Developing Countries," which was published by the World Bank in 1989, in nearly every country there exists a national training authority attached to the Ministry of Labor, either directly or semi-autonomously, which has training programs that are short in duration. They are designed to create work experience and are intended to upgrade skills of the population. This report also noted that the educational and vocational training of any population should be a group effort of the employers, the training institutions, under the guidance of a training agency. Can I say that again?
Say it one more time.
Yes.
What are we doing?
Basically, this is a report from the World Bank in 1989, which clearly demonstrates that the direction we are heading is the right direction. We are definitely putting together an agency that will work in conjunction with the training institutions in the country and the employers, so that the trainees can get on-the-job training. This report confirms the need for a national training agency in the Bahamas, which will have the responsibility of certifying Bahamians according to national and international standards, provide vocational career guidance, and allow for the development of internship programs where trainees will experience the actual work environment and be placed according to their ability. That is very important. We need this body to begin to look at our workforce and begin to decipher our workforce and put the necessary skills where they ought to be. Mr. Speaker, the most recent unemployment report outlined that there was an overall decrease in the unemployment statistics in New Providence, but there was a slight increase in Grand Bahama from 17.4 to 18%. Mr. Speaker, I must admit that this anticipated increase was a direct result of the phasing out of the 52-week program, where 500 plus workers had their program came to an end and the government was not in a financial position to continue the program at this time. Mr. Speaker, understanding the need for job creation and what it would cause after phasing out the 52-week program, the Ministry for Grand Bahama set out on a fact-finding mission early in my tenure as minister to determine the obstacles to job creation, to assist small businesses and market Grand Bahama along with the Grand Bahama Port Authority and our industrial partners. As a result, we were able to assist with the creation of hundreds of permanent jobs in the last year. And although this proved to bring some economic relief for some of our residents, there is thousands of other Bahamians on Grand Bahama that are unemployed that we must move swiftly to address. Mr. Speaker, the island of Grand Bahama is considered the industrial capital of the Bahamas. our strategic location, 60 miles off the east coast of Florida, our duty-free concessions, our modern infrastructure, and our deepwater harbor make Grand Bahama Island a major player in the global market as a trade, transshipment, logistic, and investment center. Because of these features, a number of major industrial and manufacturing companies like Borco, the Freeport Container Port, the Grand Bahama Shipyard, Pharmacare Polymers, and Statoil have made Grand Bahama their home and employ thousands of Grand Bahamians, but it is a well-known fact that many of these jobs in the industrial sector are held by foreign nationals on work permits. Mr. Speaker, this matter has become a major issue for the unemployed on the island of Grand Bahama, while non-Bahamian permits seem to have the monopoly of this lucrative market, while our local workforce sit on the outside looking in. Mr. Speaker, the Minister for Immigration and Foreign Affairs recently announced an aggressive plan for immigration reform, which I fully support for the island of Grand Bahama. Coupled with a well-funded, organized government national training agency, in collaboration with BTVI, the Total Educational Center, the 3 colleges on the island of Grand Bahama, and the financial and technical assistance of our ministry partners, I believe that we will secure much needed employment opportunities for Grand Bahamians going forward. Mr. Speaker, training is certainly paramount in order for the government to create the environment conducive for job creation. And this national training agency will be the organization that will lead the way in coordinating our government's effort. Mr. Speaker, the recently announced tax reform measures by this administration and our need and desire to join WTO will contribute significantly to the growth of our industrial, our manufacturing, our agriculture, our maritime sectors on Grand Bahama, which will mean that there will be even a greater need for skilled Bahamians to work in these specialized areas. It is therefore extremely important for the country to establish this national training agency, especially on Grand Bahama, as it will allow the labor force studies to be conducted in order to determine the position we must take or we must make available in the industrial, the maritime, agriculture, and hospitality sectors, and reveal the qualifications necessary to work within these specialized areas. Mr. Speaker, in order for the economy of Grand Bahama to be revitalized, we must create the work pool necessary for industry to expand and meet the peak demands for labor at the existing and future industrial facilities on Grand Bahama. At present, there is a great need for industrial painters, blasters, scaffolders, mechanics, pipe fitters, welders, fabricators, heavy equipment operators, and a number of other positions in the technical and vocational areas that can be filled by Bahamians. And these Bahamians are willing and they are eager to be trained at this moment. Mr. Speaker, over the past year, my ministry has been in negotiation with our industrial partners as it relates to hiring of more Bahamians in these facilities with less specialized technical skills. I wish to report the progress we have made with the Grand Bahama Shipyard and Borco, who have agreed to provide initial training off-site at the former campus of the Lewis Yard Primary School, and our industrial partners have already formulated an accredited curriculum for training subspecialists in technical and vocational fields to work in the industrial sector. Practical training is a part of the overall qualifications, and it is important to note that all of these programs have been vetted already by the National Training Agency and will be officially launched late next month. Mr. Speaker, our industrial partners have realized the benefits of the National Training Agency in developing the skills of our local workforce, and they are willing to assist the government in creating the work pool necessary for industry to grow. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, in the upcoming months, it has been mentioned in this honorable place the opening of the 5-star all-inclusive Sunwing property. And by the way, I got an email about 2 days ago of an ad that is in the Sunwing Elif program already marketing Grand Bahama. So Grand Bahama is already being marketed while the renovations and the movement and the development of the hotel is taking place. So that project is up and going, and Sunwing, our partner, is fully out there marketing that particular location. 1,000 jobs are expected to be created. However, I cannot overemphasize that we must begin training of Grand Bahamians in the hospitality and tourism industry immediately, as the need for skilled labor who can deliver superior customer service is compulsory at the development of this scale. The philosophy of the Blue Diamond Resort, which is a brand that the Reef Hotel will be transformed into, is to provide experiences that are authentically Bahamian, display genuine hospitality through engaging services and paying close attention to important details. Mr. Speaker, it is a known fact that even the best locations and offerings would be meaningless without outstanding service. And with the National Training Agency, in conjunction with our private partners, we in Grand Bahama are working diligently to uplift the quality of service that we are presently giving in our hotel resorts. And this program is going to be instrumental to ensure that this property receive the service from Bahamians that is necessary and to prepare our tourism product for years to come. Therefore, this hotel property must strive, and in order for it to strive, the employees must offer and deliver a natural experience in a warm and welcome environment. Mr. Speaker, my ministry's vision for Grand Bahama revolves around facilitating economic growth and opportunities for all residents, which will position this island and its residents to play a meaningful role in the turnaround of our national economy. We have discussed the government plans for training island-wide in the areas of hospitality, industry, and provide valid certification for participants of this program. Once again, the National Training Agency will lead the way for the government policy and for our job creation program through their collaborative effort with all of the institutions on Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, I would like to, at this time, to invite teachers, specialists, and other civic organizations to partner with the Ministry for Grand Bahama, the National Training Agency, to assist us in the preparation of Grand Bahamians for the workforce. I would like to reiterate that it will take a collaborative effort to diversify and to restore the economy of Grand Bahama. No government agency alone can do this. This is a collaborative effort with the private sector, the Ministry for Grand Bahama, the National Training Institute, Agency, the BTVI, Success, Tarif, COB. Everyone is on board and must be on board to provide the necessary support mechanism we need for the National Training Institute to function. Mr. Speaker, it is my understanding that a number of Caribbean counterparts are a part of the Caribbean Association of National Training Agencies, known as CANTA. This group of Caribbean countries, including Antigua, Barbados, Belize, Guyana, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, have two major goals, which are to promote the development of competitive regional workforce and to ensure uniform provision for competency-based training, assessment, and certification. Once again, proving that the Bahamas is only lining up with our regional partners. They all have the National Training Agency, and all we're doing is basically lining up with our CARICOM brothers and sisters. Mr. Speaker, while doing my research on member countries, I realized that they all, for the most part, have an active National Training Agency supported by legislation. I'd like to say that again. They have an active training agency supported by legislation and has autonomous powers to accomplish their mandates, which is training in collaboration and with all of the training institutes in the Bahamas that are accredited. I also realize that the fundamental purpose of each of these national training agencies is synonymous with ours. So we are not going off on a tangent on our own. We're lining up with our regional partners, which is to create a workforce that is certified, that is competent, that is innovative, that is enterprising and entrepreneurial, and therefore contributing to the continued development of our country. It was also able to discern that the success of the National Training Agency in our neighboring countries like Jamaica, Trinidad, and Tobago are proving to be effective in the coordination and standardization and monitoring of the evaluation of all technical and vocational education and training. I need to say that again because one of the speakers on the other side seemed to be confused as if the National Training Agency is an institute. No, the National Training Institute agency will coordinate, standardize, monitor, and provide evaluation for all technical and vocational education and training. That's what this agency is all about. I have surmised, therefore, that in order for further development and diversification of our economy, and particularly on Grand Bahama, we need this National Training Agency. Grand Bahama, we need this agency because this agency will supervise and ensure that we have a government agency looking at our training and ensuring that individuals are placed where they're supposed to be. This bill will establish the National Training Agency and solidify our training efforts that we need so desperately on the island of Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, the bottom line is that Grand Bahamians need jobs. But in order for residents to be qualified for the jobs, they are and will that are present and will become available, we must provide training services and facilitate opportunities and internships so that the skills that they receive are consistent with what is required in the industrial sector, our maritime industry, and our hospitality sectors. We must increase our supply of skilled Bahamian workers in order to decrease our demand for import foreign labor. Can I say that again? We must increase our supply of skilled Bahamian workers in order to decrease the demand for imported foreign labor. This is one of the main ways to tackle the high unemployment rate, particularly in our industrial sector on Grand Bahama. I have done my calculation. I have worked in conjunction with the Minister for Immigration and Foreign Affairs. We have seen the amount of work permits that are being issued in the industrial sector. It is now the government responsibility to implement this National Training Agency so that we can train our workforce who can replace some of the expat labor that is coming on Grand Bahama. It's a simple situation. Yes, and it's not anti-foreign. It is us to protect our workforce. We in Grand Bahama are fortunate with our crime statistics. But if we allow this thing to continue to grow and balloon out of proportion, we will find that we will actually suffer consequences by not implementing and putting in place the training that is necessary for our young men and women to be able to capitalize what is going on in our industrial sector.
Well said,
Mr. Speaker, the private sector on the island of Grand Bahama is working closely with the Ministry of Immigration. Don't mind the noise in the market. They're working closely with us. They're working closely with the Ministry of Labor and with the Ministry of Grand Bahama to bring these necessary changes in the sector of our economy. And with the passing of this bill, this is simply the icing on the cake. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to once again thank the Minister of Labor, the Honorable Shane Gibson, for laying the foundation. This has not just happened. He laid the foundation for this bill a long time ago. We are only completing what we started. I would also like to thank Ms. Iger and myself, who have been working very quietly with me in Grand Bahama to organize our programs so that when we launch this program in a couple of weeks, we will hit the road running. Mr. Speaker, don't mind the noise in the market. This administration is working diligently to ensure that jobs become available for Bahamians from Abaco to Inagua. And we are working diligently to putting measures in place to ensure that our workforce capitalize on the opportunities that are available now and will become available in years to come. Mr. Speaker, with those few words, Pine Ridge support the bill.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Montague.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the good constituents of Montague in an effort to provide some clarity to this National Training Agency bill that our good government has provided. Now, before I get into that, Mr. Speaker, I find it surprising that the government has failed in these last few weeks to start to address the most serious problem in this country, and that is the question of crime. Now, I have made a contribution calling on the government to start to address this matter. I have also indicated that it is my view that this is such a serious matter that this is something that we all need to get together on and do something immediately. All members on this side have supported that position and have all expressed it in their own way. So when we have simply heard nothing, all that we have heard is silence, a deafening silence from the other side. There, in my view, has been no effort whatever to start to make some attempt at addressing this most serious matter. So when, Mr. Speaker, I pick up the newspaper today and we see here DPM, no one safe. Now what message does that send to every single citizen and visitor and resident in this country when our Deputy Prime Minister sends out a message such as that? No one is safe. The governing party acknowledged that fact, or they have adopted it as a fact, and yet they really have done nothing to start to try and address this problem. When are they going to start doing something to give the public the confidence that they are making some effort to deal with it? Because we have seen nothing. We have offered to assist, as I've said, but government's position seems to be simply business as usual. They're acting as if there's no problem. They're forgetting the fact there is this problem. They're acknowledging it, and yet they dig their heads in the sand and are not able to do anything to address the problem. It is total negligence on the part of the government when we are faced with a crisis such as this, that they simply ignore it as if it doesn't exist. And until they start addressing it, having a bill such as the National Training Agency is almost a waste of time. There's going to be nobody to to train, because the economy of this country is just going to fall apart unless we start taking this seriously and endeavor to deal with the major problem facing this country. It is really the the responsibility of the government, and primarily the Prime Minister, to attempt to address this problem. And unfortunately for the Prime Minister, at the end of the day, it is not the government who are going to take most of the abuse. It is the Prime Minister. The country will look poorly on him if he fails to do something. Now, this indecisiveness really suggests in many people's minds an inability to govern. They don't understand what governing is about. When you're faced with a crisis, you confront it. You endeavor to do something about it. You try to change something. But we ignore it. We go on business as usual. We sit here debating for a day about building a parliamentary complex, a Prime Minister's residence that we can't afford. Yet we can waste time talking about that, and we cannot come here and address this serious matter which is confronting us now. This type of legislation really is useful when we're in a expansion mode. This country's not in an expansion mode. We're in a crisis mode, and that is what needs to be addressed. So when the government ignores what is going on, it leaves a perception that either they don't know what to do about it, and they are ignoring it and hoping it's going to go away. Well, they may be lucky, but that is not the way to govern a country. That is not the way to lead. And it leads perhaps to another view, and that is they don't have the answers. They don't know how to deal with it. Yet they came into government on the announcement that they had all the answers. They could solve the crime problem. And yet, if they want to go and talk about one or two less murders or less armed robberies, that is not solving the problem. And quite frankly, one is skeptical about these figures when one looks at your papers, you listen to the news, and every single day there is some new crisis facing us. When is this government going to deal with it? May well be, government may well have their reasons for ignoring it. I don't know. Maybe the people that they're concerned with they don't want to deal with them. That may well be the situation. But it seems a few short years ago.
Member rises on a point of order. The chair recognizes the member for Carlisle and
We have to be very careful and responsible in our remarks. The suggestion now being made by this member is that somehow this government is complicit in the high level of criminal activity in this country. You hear what he's saying? Maybe they don't want to deal with it. Maybe they don't want to do this. It's one thing for him. One thing for him, as a member from Montague, not to agree with our approach of dealing or solving problems. That's one thing. But for him to suggest that we are not doing anything, and to carry it further to suggest that we ain't doing anything because maybe we want it to continue, or we don't want to deal with the persons involved. You have to be careful with your language.
Thank you, member. Thank you, member.
That's why there's challenges. Think about what you're saying.
Member for Carlisle and Rumkey. Thank you. The member for Carlisle and Rumkey raised a very, very cogent and I think forthright point that I accept as the chair. And I'm concerned, member, that you remain relevant to the debate. That's the concern from the chair. So rather than go in a direction that could make those assumptions of the government, I would advise you to stay relevant to the debate at hand. Member, you may continue.
Mr. Speaker, I am just suggesting that the inactivity of government leads people outside of these four walls to make their assumptions.
Member for Montague, the member for Cat Island Rumkey. Very well.
He's still going down. He's saying this government is being inactive to the issue. Far from it. No, if he is saying that what we are doing is not enough, and or he will be doing more, that's one point. But just to say that we are inactive is wrong. It's false. You could make a lie, a falsehood.
Very well.
And he knows it.
Member from Cat Island, your point is well taken, and the chair agrees with the member for Cat Island with his intervention. So, member for Montague, I just advise you to focus on, unless you're going to give an opinion on, the government is the government of the day, and we are honorable in this place. Let not give the impression that the government is complicit in the criminal intent. So I would advise you to just remain relevant to the topic and continue to move on. Because the chair is not going to allow you to just continue along the path that you're going.
Well, Mr. Speaker, certainly though one is entitled to one's opinion.
Sure.
That is what I'm expressing.
Sure.
Now, it just seems to me though, Mr. Speaker, that when one has this inactivity, as I perceive it, and if the member for Cat Island is of the view that government is doing something actively to address the problem, that is his view, but I don't think that is the view of the majority of the people in this country. That is my view. And I can understand why. We sit here and we debate everything other than something that is as important an issue as crime. So when a few years ago we would hear in this House, Farm Road, stand up, we may well be compelled in short order to be making that same plea unless something is done to address this problem. That is all I'm saying, and I trust that government will endeavor to do something about it so that the people outside will get some confidence in the action which they are taking, will do something to address these problems. Now, as I've said, we've got the full support of this side. We're very willing to assist in any way possible to deal with that issue. Now, Mr. Speaker, if I may refer to the matter at hand, we're debating here the National Training Agency Bill. Now, as member for Long Island most eloquently stated earlier today, that this is really a rehash of the Apprentice Act, which is Chapter 320. And when you read the terms of that act and you compare them with what is in this act, it is evident that the maker of this bill had very clear understanding of those terms, because in many instances they almost quote verbatim from sections in the earlier act. So it would seem that it would have saved us a lot of time and effort if government had simply made some amendment to that act in conjunction with the provisions of the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute Act. But nevertheless, if they proceed in this way, one would be left to comment in the first instance, what are they proposed doing with this act? Because it deals with many of the same issues which are dealt with in the new bill. So, do they intend to get away with this act, or do they intend to retain it? Are we going to have two boards, one running around dealing with apprenticeship and one running around dealing with the National Training Agency? In the normal course, if in effect replaces most of the relevant provisions of the Apprenticeship Act, then you would think that perhaps they would terminate this act. But nevertheless, it remains in effect. Now, I don't know personally whether there is an apprenticeship board that has been appointed by the government, but they certainly have that obligation under the terms of the act to appoint. But it would certainly seem superfluous to have two boards running around doing very much the same things. Now, often when this government creates new acts, one is left with the thought that really this is only an attempt to provide more employment. You know, and every new government department, every new agency has the ability in very short order to be overrun with new employees. But I would have thought we are at a time in this country's history where it is incumbent on us to try and stop over expenditure, to stop this waste. And you have to view it as waste when you have persons appointed under two acts adopting very much of the same obligations. And so why the need for both? You know, when a new agency is formed, in short order they fill up the room. Government goes and rents a new building. They got a lot of space on the second and third floor. Well, before the year is out, it's filled up with more employees. And while that's one way to address the unemployment problem in this country, I don't think it's a long-term solution, because all we're doing is increasing the government expense in the civil service. Now, the original act, the Apprenticeship Act, provides for seven board members and one chairman. Thank you. The new act under Section 7 of the bill provides for this to be a board of directors of the agency. Now, it doesn't go on to specify the number of members of the board, but if you go and look at the schedule, you will find on number 1 of the schedule attached to the bill provides that the board shall consist of not less than 9 members. So now we've added another 2, or in fact more, because we then the chairman and the deputy chairman. So, and of course that is the minimum number, 9. So it could in fact exceed that number, but government seems to have money to spend on everything, so they don't seem to be particularly concerned about the numbers that they're employing. Now, if you look at Section 9 of the bill, it provides for the appointment of the board and the executive director may employ such other officers as he shall deem necessary. And then they state that notwithstanding subsection 1, the board shall not, without the prior approval of the minister, assign to any post a salary which is above the highest level of that governed by an agreement to which the board is a party. Now, maybe that means something to members opposite, but it does not mean anything to me. And I don't think it means anything to anybody else, because what are we talking about? Governed by an agreement to which the board is a party, which established the highest level of salary for director? Maybe the minister can assist.
The minister rose his feet, member yields. The chair recognizes the member for Golden Gates.
I really was trying hard not to interrupt the speakers, because from the time Long Island spoke, it seemed like they just regurgitating a bunch of nonsense, But I'll address all those when I wrap up. But suffice it to say, that particular clause speaks to agreements. For instance, you have industrial agreements signed by various agencies that govern the terms and conditions of line staff and middle management. But those industrial agreements don't govern the terms and conditions of what you call executive management. And so any salary assigned to a post higher than those referred to in the industrial agreement would then have to be decided in consultation with the minister responsible for the agency. And that's the way the clause, if you look at national insurance, it is worded the same way. All the other government agencies worded the exact same way. And so the terms and conditions are set by the executive management and the board for line staff and middle management. And anytime you get the executive management, it's done in consultation with the minister.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Monarchy, may I continue?
Thank you, Mr. Minister, although I still don't understand how we can have an agreement to which the board is a party when the board doesn't exist. So I don't know whether they somehow, ipso facto, when the bill is passed, become a party to an agreement. So it seems to me they're not party to any agreement at this point. So how we can be referring to an agreement to which they're a party is beyond me. So then it goes on in paragraph C to make an appointment to a post shall not, without the prior approval of the minister, make an appointment to a post of which a salary is assigned in accordance with paragraph A. Now, paragraph A was already said you give someone a salary which is not above the highest level of that governed by an agreement. Anyway, it would seem to me that perhaps they meant that is not assigned in accordance with paragraph A, but nevertheless, they provide that make an appointment which a salary is assigned in accordance with paragraph A. So I don't think that they meant to say that, Mr. Speaker. Now, continual concern with new agencies such as this is the manner in which it's to be funded. And so it is of concern to me, Mr. Speaker, when we look around and we note that the funds and resources of the agency include a specified annual grant from the National Insurance Board in the form of an investment. Well, I would not know what form of investment they're talking about, but I don't think they would anticipate getting any financial return from this investment. So it is a concern that we continually seem to milk the National Insurance Fund for any project that the government gets involved with.
A member for Golden House, Golden Gates rises on the point of
time, hopefully, and I'll wait until I wrap up.
the chair recognizes the member for Golden Gates.
It was the previous administration who used portions of National Insurance Fund, existing fund, to pay unemployment benefits. If we are able to cause persons to be trained to be employed, then obviously we'll have less persons claiming unemployment benefits. Right? They often do the same thing, you know. But as the member speaker now said, they're not interested and they don't support this. But then they took National Insurance Fund, paid thousands of Bahamians unemployment benefits. All we're saying now is if you're able to have them retrained with some of those funds and have them employed, then there'll be less reasons to pay people unemployment. Very simple.
Very well. Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Montague.
Well, when one looks at the purpose for which the funds are going to be used, then you do have cause for concern, because the primary object seems that, number one, provision in section 12 is the monies are to be applied in defraying the following expenditures. Number one, the remuneration of the members of the board. Two, the remuneration, advances, loans, gratuities, and pensions of and other payments to staff of the agency. So this seems to be the primary concern, is to paying the the lovers, the friends, and the family who are appointed to this board. That seems to be the main issue, not the concern with
Member from Montague, you're being a bit reckless. You're being a bit reckless, and I'm going to put a stop to this. I'm warning you now. Be responsible in your remarks. Be honorable in your remarks, and state the facts. If you don't know the facts, state an opinion. But the chair expects more. And if you don't cease and desist, I'll have to ask you to resume your seat in finality. The chair recognizes the member for Montague.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Section 12.1 goes on to provide 12.2 that the minister may approve any fund expended for the purpose of paragraphs A and B. Well, I thought that in the earlier provision, referring to all of these expenses must be, I would have thought, approved by the minister. So when we talk about may approve, I thought shall approve perhaps would be more appropriate. Then, Mr. Speaker, if we go along to Section 19, which deals with the transfer of assets. Now, this seems to be a very dangerous provision here, because I don't know if members opposite understand exactly what they're agreeing to, but they're providing that there should be, by virtue of this section and without further assurance, vest in the agency and fee simple, free of all trust and encumbrances, all such land which immediately before the commencement of this act vested in the treasurer for and on behalf of any agency or institution. Now, as I'm sure our members here realize, the vast majority of the property held on behalf of the people of this country vests in the treasurer. And so when we talk about all property vested in the treasurer for and on behalf of any agency or institution will automatically vest in this board. So to me, it's rather frightening that that is what is being proposed, because it seems virtually every single property here that is held for any agency or institution immediately is transferred to the board. Then we talk about the movable property and undertakings owned by the government and used for the operation of any agency or institution immediately before the date of the commencement of this act shall, by virtue of this act, be transferred to and vested in the agency. Again, what are we talking about?
Member for Golden Gates.
19.1. I did foreshadow, Mr. Speaker, that there would be an amendment to this section, where I said that we will delete the words of the last two words, they of course are now, and we will insert after any such agency. And so I did foreshadow an amendment to that particular section.
Very well, thank you for that intervention. Member for Montague.
Mr. Speaker, it's rather nervous to me when we got government amending it before we've even completed discussing it. I mean, obviously they've not looked at this very closely before they brought it to this House. That often happens too. So I'm glad that some amendment will be made, but obviously we want to see what that is before we can give it our approval for what it's worth. Now in Section 21, it's provided the agent, this is talking about registration of providers. The agency may register the provider if the agency is satisfied that the provider is approved and accredited and has met the criteria for the provision of education in training courses or programs. Well, I don't know how you become approved or accredited, but there doesn't seem to be any assistance in the bill. How you become approved? Okay. Then you go to Section 22, Register of Trainees. Now, they talk about there'll be a list maintained and the register shall be available for inspection. Now, subsection 3 says the board shall cause to be issued to a person selected as a trainee a certificate in the prescribed form. Now, I'm not sure whether it is intended, Mr. Speaker, to deal simply with a certificate being issued to a trainee, but I would have thought it would be of more concern is a certificate being issued to the trainee on completing the training to certify that he has achieved whatever goal he had. But as far as I could see, the only certificate that is being referred to is a certificate issued to a trainee. So if it was intended as in, I think it's Section 16 of the Apprenticeship Act, there's reference in there to the issue of a certificate upon receipt of completion. So that may be what was intended, and this was not intended to refer to the apprenticeship itself. Now we look at Section 25, Powers of Inspectors, and the member for Long Island made very powerful contribution with regard to that issue, because as this stands, you're basically encouraging persons not to take a trainee, because this section simply allows somebody to come in your house or your business. Imagine that you have someone there, or have had during the last 6 months, a trainee on your premises. They could walk right in without warning, and they are entitled without any limitation to virtually the run of your business. Now, if you would compare this Section 25 with Section 19 of the previous Act, the Apprenticeship Act, you'll find that the limitations are provided in that section to limit what you can come and ask for. Don't just walk into business and demand all sorts of...
The member stands on a point of order. The chair recognizes the member for Golden Gates.
But there is something called accountability. First of all, if you take an establishment that agrees to accept apprentices in this program, they are paid a fee. Paid a fee. So you have an establishment who decide that they would give these persons certificates saying they completed the apprenticeship program. They never did. The inspector will walk inside there. He asks for certain information. He verifies that these persons actually did attend sessions here. And if you can't verify it, then you determine whether or not you continue to pay them a fee or continue to allow them to be a part of the program. But there's something called accountability. We don't pay you a fee to train individuals and then you're not accountable. What kind of program you run here? If you agree to be a part of the program, these are the terms and conditions under which you agree to be a part of it. And so I don't understand anybody not wanting to hold businesses accountable for agreements that they would have signed.
Very well. Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Montague.
Mr. Speaker, it's understood that the inspector would have the right to come and inspect, but it's the basis on which they're entitled to enter your premises. And as I've said, if the member opposite would review Section 19 of the earlier Act, he will find that the provision here in this new bill is virtually verbatim, except that it puts limitations on what you can do. You can come in and ask for details with regard to the employment of that trainee. That is all. But
point of order is a point of order. Member for Montague.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador.
For too long, the members opposite has espoused this erroneous view that the National Training Agency Bill is nothing more than the Apprenticeship Act 320. It's absolute nonsense. The Apprenticeship Act deals with the regulation of apprenticeship. Right? It deals with employer and employee relationship. where they would have entered into I was an apprentice. You become a lawyer, I was an apprentice. I signed articles of apprenticeship with Charles Barnwell. That was between he and I. That agreement had to be registered with the apprenticeship board so that the board would know, well, Philip Davis is an apprentice to Charles Barnwell. If I had any complaint, I could have taken it to the board vis-a-vis what was occurring between us. And if he had a complaint, he could have taken it to the board vis-a-vis what happened between us. The Apprenticeship Act deals specifically with, right? No, it's an act to make provision for the regulation of training of trade apprentices. Right? It's to have a board to ensure, the history of it all, if you go into history, right? Many of us were abused by our masters as apprentices and as tradespersons. Person wanted to be a carpenter, mason, or whatever trade he wished, right? And it was thought that an intervention was required to ensure that no abuse was taking place in the workplace. So a statutory regime, a legislative regime, was set up to regulate the training of trade apprentices. Right? The board was set up. The inspector had no role to play other than to ensure that the conditions of the articles were being carried out by either side if a complaint was made. And so, yes, as an inspector of the board, he had no automatic right to go in. He could make the request. If the request wasn't acceded to, then there were other means by which he could have invoked the provisions of the Apprenticeship Act. This act is more expansive. This deals with the National Trade Agency, where government is today taking a proactive approach, right? And a sustainable approach, right? Where we have seen and we've all experienced that part of the problem with our unemployment numbers is because of the competency skills of our people. It's because of our people not being directed in the right affairs of business or work community, and hence this bill is to be the vehicle by which and through which our Bahamian people, our people, could become a part of identity, because it is a partnership between not just the government, but the private sector.
Very well.
It's going to look into the private sector, see, where are your needs? And then we are going to find our Bahamian people and say, look, these are the needs of this economy, and we are going to get you ready for that. As to be proactive.
Very well.
It's a completely different. So when the continual, but the previous act, the act still exists for those who want to be apprenticed, if they wish.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for...
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Member for Long Island, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Since I was the first person to raise this, I listened to what Cat Island has to say. And, you know, the reality is the Apprenticeship Act was brought into force in 2001. That is the act that we have here today that we're dealing with. The one that he would have signed on with his tutor is probably something completely different. The truth of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, this is about individuals. This is about individuals. No matter who the facilitating agency is, the individual has to have a record placed in whichever private facility that they are placed, not just to protect their interests, but also to make sure that these things are in fact happening. So there has to be parameters as to what those inspectors will be asking for. So despite all the flowery talk and legal gymnastics, Mr. Speaker, the fact remains that these are very wide-ranging powers for this group of inspectors in this bill as presented today, and it is going to cause a lot of problems in the business community if it moves forward as is.
Thank you, Honourable Member. If you'll be brief, member for Cat Island. Don't want to make that this another debate, and you'll be given an opportunity to speak. The chair recognizes the member for Cat Island.
She said she was talking about the
Remember-
Apprenticeship Act 2001.
Member, speak to the issue and not respond to the member for Long Island, because the chair is not going to allow a debate between. Yeah, very well. Member for Montague.
Yeah.
Member for Montague. You have the floor.
In 2001. Commenced in 2001.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What could you say after you're done?
If I understood the member for Cat Island, Mr. Speaker, he seems to be suggesting that there's something really revolutionary with regard to the provisions here to protect the apprentice. That is not so. As I said, virtually verbatim, the powers of the inspector were set out in the earlier act, the Apprenticeship Act. They're all set out there, and the regulations which talk about the obligations to enforce a standard of education and so on, all of those are verbatim from the Section 20 of the earlier act. The only additional word they said, instead of saying the standard of education which a person shall be required to attain for employment, and they've added the magical words that prescribing the standard of education. So all of those provisions are laid out there. The inspector has the rights under the Apprenticeship Act to, at all reasonable times during working hours, to enter premises. All of those provisions are retained there. But as I said, the issue is that it limits their rights to simply inspect matters relating specifically to the matter in force, whether they and they relate solely to the trainee, the employment of the trainee. But you're then given far wider powers under this new bill. There's no limitation whatever with regard to the authorities of the inspector. He exercised such powers as may be necessary for carrying into effect the provisions of this act, and shall provide an inspector with such information and produce for inspection documents as the inspector may require. No limitation whatever. And it behoves government, if they intend proceeding with this bill, to make amendments there, because as this thing stands, you're going to find out that many people are going to be reluctant to have a trainee in the premises if an inspector is going to be able to come to their premises and go through their records without any limitation whatsoever. And then when you talk about, and you commit an offense and you're liable to summary conviction if you refuse to answer a question, I mean, this is just getting out of hand. Now, when the regulations which are attached to the bill, in it they set out how a board is to be comprised, and they list the chairman, deputy chairman appointed by the minister, and the chairperson shall not be a member of parliament. Now, I don't know whether they intended to limit it only to chairman and deputy chairperson, but as I read this, because the members can exceed 9 members, that it would enable persons who are parliamentarians to be members of this board, whether or not they are chairperson and deputy chairperson. There's no limitation. Well then, if it was the government's intention, then spell out no member of the board shall be a parliamentarian. Stop. Full stop. Well, why would government waste their time dealing only with the chairperson and the deputy if members are not going to be, a member of parliament is not going to be a member of this board? Spell it out. I wonder often whether members opposite do in fact read these bills or just look at what the intent is and they run off on with the intent. But the, and also in section 6 or paragraph 6 or whatever of the schedule, refers to remuneration the board shall pay to the members of the council. Now, perhaps that's a mistake. I don't think there isn't a council as far as I could see, so presumably they meant to refer to the board or some other term, but certainly not the council. There is no council, as I understand it. So, Mr. Speaker, there really seems to be a rush to judgment here. Government have prepared this bill without too much close examination of the terms, which is surprising considering all the lawyers that we have on the other side. I would have thought some of them might take the time to look at these and determine whether or not it should be amended before it gets to this House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Dane and Grandstown.
On the point of order, I guess, what I just said to his last point, he indicated that the schedule was attached to the bill. There is circulating a list of amendments to the bill, and there's an amendment to the schedule substituting the word council for board.
Very well. Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The Chair recognizes Honourable Member for North Abaco.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of the great constituency of North Abaco. Mr. Speaker, I'm always grateful and honored for the opportunity to represent my people and to offer my service to the people of the Bahamas in this honorable House. Speaker, in the midst of what seemed to be controversy on whether or not Bahamians are qualified to fulfill skilled positions, in particular in the foreign investment sector, the government, in keeping with its mandate to provide opportunities for education, has implemented yet another program that will certainly enhance the ability of thousands of Bahamians to become more employable. Speaker, despite many Bahamians being skilled workers, having a college education, and a variety of vocational and technical training, there are still a large percentage of persons, in particular our young people, who are still not skilled enough to maintain a career job that comes with a decent salary. Speaker, in our society today, we have mothers, single mothers, who have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. In some cases, you have both the husband and the wife having to work several jobs. And it all stems back to the fact that many of our people are not skilled enough to receive decent salary because they don't have a good job. Mr. Speaker, the 52 weeks program, as we heard so much about today, is an example of this dilemma. A program that was initially designed, I believe, or intended to train Bahamians. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, that was the initial intent, to train Bahamians. But it subsequently lost its relish after being used, as we heard, as an election ploy. You remember, Mr. Speaker, this resulted in no real training or benefits for those involved. And you know, I couldn't say, I have to say that maybe the circumstances at hand, Mr. Speaker, that created such a mess with the 52 weeks program, when we understand the dynamics involved, we were in the heat of an election period. We had a high unemployment rate, and so the temptation was so great that training automatically went out the window. It was more of now creating jobs or just giving somebody a job.
Member from Long Island rises on the point of order. The chair recognizes the member from Long Island.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to advise the honorable member for North Abaco that the programs implemented with the 52-week program started, as articulated by his colleague from South Beach, in 2009, 3 years before the election. That is when we started. That is when we started the training program.
Members.
Mr. Speaker, that is when the training program began. Mr. Speaker, he's saying training went out of the... Mr. Speaker, the member just said training went out the window because of the 52-week program. The 52-week program in and of itself was a training program. And additionally, the training began since 2009.
Well, point of order. The chair recognizes the member for Pinewood.
That the 52-week program was a training program. I headed the chamber when this program was implemented, and there was no training component to this program. It was a placement program, an election program, nothing to do with training.
Member for North Abaco, member for Long Island, I give you...
Order. Mr. Speaker, I said earlier that the member for Pinewood was a part of that, and I can tell you in this House today that he is misleading in that assertion that he just made. There was every reason to have people trained in those positions. That is why they were also carried over.
The chair is going to allow the member for Pinewood a final response, and then the chair is recognizing the member for North Abaco. Chair recognizes the member for Pinewood.
I headed a national training program that was completely separate and apart from the 52-week program. The national training program came to a final, an end before this program was institutionalized or developed or implemented. This had nothing to do with the national training program. I can tell you the details of the national training program because, Mr. Speaker, I wrote the plan for it. I wrote it. I sat down on my computer and I wrote it and I submitted it to the government, who accepted it. I accepted it. I designed the program, and the program did not meet any of the expectations that I had for it. It was not a bad program, Mr. Speaker. It was not a bad program. The problem was it was underfunded, one, and it was not designed for sustainability. It had a finite end, and the component that I anticipated would have led to the development of some skills that would benefit people long term did not live up to the full expectation. I cannot say that there were not some benefits, but it did not meet the expectation. But I'd like to say it was separate and apart from the 52-week program.
Thank you, honourable member. The chair recognizes the member. Members. The chair recognizes the member for North Abaco. Welcome to Parliament.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker.
You got your first point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, as I said, the intent. I'm sure that as the member from Long Island, the intent would have been to train. I did mention that the intent was to train, but of course, during the height of election time, you would have seen that the training that was supposed to be
state your opinion
thrown out the window.
Very well.
And that's what we see. That's the evidence that's on the ground, Speaker, contrary to what others may think or say. Speaker, education is one of those areas the government cannot afford to compromise or play political games with. And as I said, the previous administration used this program in a way it should have never been used. In my humble opinion, the message was clear. It was used to facilitate, as stated, a job placement program instead of strategic watchful training. In essence, Mr. Speaker, it seemed to be, in my humble opinion, it was an exchange. It was a job in exchange for votes. No doubt, this was in response to their political desperation and a declining unemployment rate. The truth is, the program itself lost its purpose. And we must not allow this kind of behavior, Mr. Speaker, to exist in the future. Too much is at risk. Mr. Speaker, in addition, our society remains attrition by a large percentage of high school dropouts. Statistics shows that many of our social ills and other crime-related problems are committed by individuals who may have dropped out of high school. For example, some of our young men and women, in most instances due to the lack of education and the inability to reason effectively, have entangled themselves with alternative lifestyles. A lifestyle spurred, regrettably, by drugs and alcohol. Speaker, many of our young people have lost their way in this country. A whole lot of them. And you find that many are now destroying their lives. Many have been thrown into prison. Some made refuge or found refuge with notorious street gangs. It is the only place some of them can find love. And the sad thing about it is, while everything goes on as usual, this is the reality on the streets. This is what is happening. While others slip into a state of despair and isolation, withdrawing themselves from society. Speaker, I heard a member from Montague mention crime. But what the member must know that crime is closely associated. I believe education has a lot to do with prevention of crime. And this is why this legislation, this bill that we're bringing here to Parliament, I believe has the ability to even put a dent in crime, because it educates our people, our young people. So it's a close association. Speaker, as we heard, the Minister for National Security gave us some statistics. This will also tell us that many of the young men in this nation are committing these crimes. And the fact of the matter is, I believe it has close ties to education. The very fiber of the family structure is being destroyed right before our eyes. Mr. Speaker, I say to this nation today, and I want to say this loud and clear, not only do we need education, but this nation needs God. We need the fear of God back in the Bahamas. Anytime, Mr. Speaker, you can have a person, as alleged by the newspaper, can walk into a church and can rape, or even attempt to rape, or even consider to rape somebody in God's house. Speaker, we are in a serious position. The morale of some of the mindset of our people has been greatly damaged. We need the fear of God back in the Bahamas. I applaud the Minister for Labor, the Honorable Member for Golden Gates, and his team of experts for introducing a timely bill in a junction in our nation's history when Bahamians must educate themselves if they will become the dominant proportion of skilled workers in this country. Well, the question remains, will we settle for minimum wages as common laborers, while both foreign and domestic investors import more and more skilled laborers? And the thing about this is, Mr. Speaker, when we look at the common laboring man, there's a whole lot of competition in that area. We have, right in Abaco alone, we have an immigration problem. And most of the people that we involve in this whole problem, the fact is that they are also void of education. So they're going for the same job the common man is going for. So there's a great competition in that area. One of the things that we discovered, Mr. Speaker, is that most of these people are being hired, these immigrants are being hired because of cheap labor. Yeah. The people, and not just that, we found out too, we did a study, we found out that a lot of them are being hired also because they just prefer, the business people just prefer to get these immigrant laborers. They say they work hard. They say they don't argue, they don't have bad attitude. I think we heard it here today, Mr. Speaker. They say some of the Bahamians have bad attitude. The immigrants don't talk back to you. These are the things that we're experiencing on the ground. So there's a serious problem when it comes to our young people who are uneducated finding a job. The Speaker, the Minister of Labor, and the government seeks to establish 4 areas of interest, namely hospitality and tourism, retail operations and sales, auto service and care, and office procedures. And I am particularly interested in 2 of the areas of study for my people in Abaco. Hospitality and tourism, which is the thrust of our local economy, and it continues to afford countless of Abaconians the privilege of enjoying a decent lifestyle. Abaco, as I say all the time, having such a vibrant tourist product, attracting major investors from around the world, home to some of the world-renowned destinations like Discovery Land at Bakers Bay, Abaco Club on Winding Bay, Green Turtle Club and Marina, Treasure Key Resort and Marina, and other popular domestic investments like the Abaco Beach Resort, Hopetown Harbor Lodge, Orchid Bay Resort and Marina, and Schooner Bay. All of these, among others, Mr. Speaker, are already reaping substantial dividends and continues to play their part in attracting more tourists to our shores. Mr. Speaker, with establishments like these, it is imperative that we as a government continue to promote education and training. This to ensure that we have readily a pool of skilled workers for investors to choose from. And perhaps, Mr. Speaker, other investors that may be looking at islands like Abaco to expand their portfolios will know and appreciate the fact that we have the expertise and labor skills to make their resort the best vacation spot in the world. Now, Mr. Speaker, this concept is for all the Bahamas. That means every employee that is working at an establishment within their island must have a mindset that they're going to do the best that they can be, or they can be the best they can be on their job, as to make that destination or that company the best company or the best place for visitors to come. And that is the kind of mindset we want to portray in Abaco. That's what we're trying to do. And this National Training Agency will help us get to that goal. Mr. Speaker, the other area of interest is the area of retail operations and sales. This is an area that can encourage, and I believe, Bahamians to be successful entrepreneurs. Many Bahamians today are interested in owning their own business and may have already started their own business. We see a number of SMEs, especially petty shops, throughout our communities. Some have been around for some time, while others have opened doors and they close short time later. The Bahamians love petty shops, Speaker. I open up a little food store. Someone's going to open up one right down the street for me. We love to know that we own our own business, which is good. But, Mr. Speaker, I believe this training will cause for a better understanding on how to operate a business successfully, especially or specifically the SMEs. One of the problems we're seeing now is understanding cash flow. This has always been a problem for many small Bahamian businesses. Many of us, Mr. Speaker, are guilty. We believe whatever we make in sales for the day is for our own consumption. And very little resources is placed back into the business. Speaker, I have a business today. I make a couple of dollars. I'm on the plane tomorrow, headed to Miami. That is the concept. That is what happens on reality. So this training for retail operations is going to be very crucial. This kind of action has hurt many businesses over the years and resulted in failure. Speaker, I was one who had my own independent thinking when I thought about the roads improvement projects and many of the business that stated that they were affected by the road works. And you know, Mr. Speaker, it's a good thing that this government took the initiative to assist those businesses. But my question in my mind was, how many of those businesses really was affected by the road works? Or was it just a way of getting additional monies or hiding the way their businesses run? And that was my own independent thinking. I believe many of the businesses were affected, but I believe there may be some, Mr. Speaker, that may have other alternatives. So it's not a bad idea for anyone who owns a business to be a part of this training project and learn about how to run a business successfully. Mr. Speaker, in addition, individuals who may not choose to go into their own business after certifying themselves will better appreciate the operations of their employers' establishments and be able to understand why theft, and I repeat, why theft is such a deterrent to successful operations. Right now, Mr. Speaker, we are experiencing a problem in one of the major resorts in my island, where the reports are there are many thefts. So just for an employee to understand that by you taking something out of that business, that can hurt the business real bad. And you can understand that you can even cause that business to shut down. I believe, Mr. Speaker, it was the owner of what's the food store? The food store, Super Value, who said that copper theft was a major issue for him. Thousands of dollars were taken out of his business just through theft. Mr. Reuben Roberts. And so, having a clear understanding, Mr. Speaker, of how business operates, even for employees, will cause them to appreciate the operations of that business. And so, I commend the government for pushing this initiative forward. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I once again commend the Prime Minister and the government of the Bahamas for embracing education in such a way, insisting that its policies are geared at providing every available opportunity for Bahamians to excel in their country. That is important, Mr. Speaker. Bahamians must excel in this country. This is our Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. We as Bahamians must be afforded the opportunity to be major stakeholders in our economy. But the only way this will happen if we upgrade ourselves through education, and that's as much of us as possible, upgrade ourselves through education, and that is exactly, Mr. Speaker, I believe, what this government intends to do. So, Mr. Speaker, North Abaco supports the bill. I just want to say something before I sit down, Mr. Speaker. I told the Minister of National Security, that he told me, always tell me, you want to talk a little longer. I want to tell him this, Mr. Speaker. When I started out ministering, I ministered for 20 minutes. I was able to say what I need to say in 20 minutes. But now, Mr. Speaker, they tell me I'm too long-winded. I went a little longer now, almost an hour now. So I just tell him that don't challenge me. Because if he want to challenge me, then I might have my way. It's getting a little relaxed now, Mr. Speaker, but I can tell you the truth.
Getting comfortable.
I'm getting comfortable. Mr. Speaker, I highly commend this government for what they're doing. Education is the key to success.
That's right.
And our young people are very excited about this. We're excited about this in Abaco, and I'm telling them it's coming to Abaco. Abaco is one of those islands that this will be implemented. And I, too, am very excited as their member of parliament. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the great people, Mr. Speaker, of the great constituency of Elizabeth, and certainly as the Minister of Financial Services, I again rise in this honorable place to offer my full support for this important, this forward-looking, and progressive initiative of the government of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, as I have said on many occasions, I represent an economically diverse community in the constituency of Elizabeth. Many don't realize I span from Port New Providence, past Treasure Cove, down St. Andrews Beach Estates, through Yamacraw Shores, through Yamacraw Beach Estates, through Elizabeth Estates, and into Cool Acres. And as I mentioned during my budget contribution, I firmly believe that while the economic realities of the people of Elizabeth may run the full spectrum of possibilities, I know that my constituents by and large have hopes and desires for their children, their siblings, and themselves. And those hopes and desires are universal, Mr. Speaker. We all want a better future and an opportunity to fully participate in the economy of our great country. This piece of legislation we debate here today, Mr. Speaker, provides many and will provide many with just that opportunity. It will provide the framework for continued training, for continued skills development of thousands and thousands and thousands of Bahamians who seek to just be a part of the economic development and reality of this great country. Before addressing this bill and some of the training initiatives in the Ministry of Financial Services, I again want to emphasize what I believe as an important element of training in our country: the provision of training at the local, community, and constituency level, Mr. Speaker, which will go hand in hand with the strategy and plans for a national training initiative. And we just heard the member for North Abaco speak. And he spoke passionately about Bahamian interest in small business development and the need for continued education and skills development in being able to successfully run in a sustainable manner one small business. We recognize this as well in the great constituency of Elizabeth, Mr. Speaker. And in preparation of the much-heralded small and medium-sized development legislation that will come this calendar year, in May we launched our Small Business Symposium to address just those concerns that the member for North Abaco very eloquently described about his constituents. See, this is part of the economic empowerment program that we have in Elizabeth, and is designed as a program to educate, train, and prepare residents of Elizabeth to enter into their own business in a successful and a sustainable fashion. And addressing many of the concerns that the member for North Abaco raised, it informs new entrepreneurs about logistical steps to successfully manage a business. It helps the small business owners develop and execute business plans that provide the framework for being sustainable in small business. And it provides business executives with strategies on how to build and perfect the business model. As I said in the budget contribution, this was a highly, highly successful event of training at the community and constituency level. Over 100 registered participants, and week in and week out, more than 80 persons attended across the entire spectrum of the economic diversity of our nation. This is evidence of the need not only to have this national training initiative, an agency that this legislation puts in place, but for us as representatives of constituencies to ensure that there are constituent community level training in specific areas. In Elizabeth, we have the absolute commitment to training and advancement, and we will continue with this mandate at the community level. And I have spoken both to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Labor, who is responsible for the National Training Agency, to emphasize the impact and importance of bringing and extending a national framework to our communities throughout the entire Bahamas. And we heard the member for North Abaco speak just about that, about bringing the initiatives at the local level to his constituency and his townships in Abaco. It is a matter of great importance, Mr. Speaker, and I know you
as a much heralded member of Parliament and representative of your constituents who undertake a number of different progressive and positive functions at the community level, you can appreciate the impact that something at a nationally planned level has when you bring it right down to your people. It's of utmost importance. Mr. Speaker, in the Ministry of Financial Services, we likewise have an absolute mandate to take training and education to the community within areas of our portfolio. In fact, throughout the last year, we've had a large number of public training and education events, extending it not only to the private sector, but also to the public sector, Mr. Speaker, and to students and institutions such as College of the Bahamas and the Bahamas Institute of Financial Services. See, we have to have this realization that training is relevant in all areas of the economy and in all demographics of society. And as a ministry like mine that has a portfolio for financial services and trade, develops our training initiatives for the professions and professionals within our portfolio, we look to cause that to be fed into what is being provided as a framework through the National Training Agency. Because the honorable member for Golden Gates just told me, he said, Ryan, you would not know that it does not, the level of skill development, although important, is not the sole function of advancement of a professional in our economy. And it is the framework and the soft skill development that is going to be a primary focus of this National Training Agency, married with the continued technical skills development that will provide the entire framework for skills and development in this country, causing for the comprehensive opportunity for our people to advance, Mr. Speaker. In terms of the financial services element of my portfolio, we've undertaken and included training and human development as an essential pillar of my ministry. In fact, my 10-year strategy plan includes a vision for long-term betterment of the people employed within financial services. The Ministry of Financial Services has decided to focus on human development and mechanisms to improve productivity and competitiveness within the sector, Mr. Speaker. And my hope is that through education, training, and development, financial services will not only be a source of high-paying jobs for Bahamians, but also a source of entrepreneurial activity for Bahamian professionals. And the most efficient, and it will become the most efficient and productive sector of our economy here in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas is competing with many jurisdictions for the best international financial sector firms. The choice of where to locate is the result of complex interplay of factors. But we recognize one of the main factors in location choice is the skill development domestically. Indeed, the Bahamas has always touted itself as having a large pool of talented employees as a major competitive advantage in our industry. However, the development of this pool does not happen on its own, Mr. Speaker. It takes public policy combined with private sector initiatives to cause it to be ultimately successful for our people. It causes policies by a government married with what's going on the private sector, recognizing other deficiencies and putting in place a framework that is in place through this legislation that will cause the ultimate skills development training for our people. Again, this government can demonstrate the forethought of the reintroduction of my ministry, the Ministry of Financial Services, to see the importance of this human development component in this industry and for our people. As part of my ministry's efforts to reinforce the Bahamas' global position as a financial center and to encourage and enable product innovation in the country, my ministry will undertake measures and is designing and executing programs right now to further develop a platform of skills that will translate into real returns for Bahamian people. My ministry's work programs focuses on education at all levels within the industry, Mr. Speaker. First, the strategy includes a foreign language and training and cultural sensitivity program. We need to make sure that our Bahamian professionals have an equal opportunity to move from the back office of these institutions, Mr. Speaker, where their skills and talents are focused and appreciated for a number of years. We want to see, through training and skill development, Bahamians move to the front office, where they have client interfaces, where they have client relationships, and where they lead the boards of these institutions from all over the world, Mr. Speaker. This is what a comprehensive strategy of training and skills development encompasses. One that leverages the framework of a national training agency with the policy commitment of our ministries in the respective industries that we promote. That's how it is done, Mr. Speaker. My ministry also seeks to ensure that relevant business languages are offered at our institutions for higher learning. Traditional languages of French and Spanish are offered throughout the length and breadth of our country. We're grateful for the support of the Chinese government, for the Confucius Institute at the College of the Bahamas, to further contribute to the Bahamas' understanding of Chinese culture and language. We plan on approaching the Brazilian embassy to ensure that we have assistance necessary to have language trainers in Portuguese throughout all of our institutions. But we also need to learn Swiss German, for instance, our Middle Eastern languages, as we look to seek new opportunities and new markets. Second, Mr. Speaker, my ministry is committed to higher level certifications of trainings within our industry. The ministry right now is in discussions with the Caribbean Export Development Agency and a task force within the Caribbean region in financial services with respect to establishing a regional center of excellence for financial services right here in the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. Right here in the Bahamas. In April, representatives from the Bahamas Institute of Financial Services met with representatives from this task force from the region. And the presentation made was well received by the task force. The same task force also met with representatives from the College of the Bahamas School of Business to discuss programs and to consider opportunities for collaboration. Mr. Speaker, I have met preliminarily with funding institutions, such as the IDB and the European Union, to seek out the necessary funds to develop the infrastructure of a world-renowned center of excellence in financial services, to provide the framework and training that's needed for the people within our industry, to cause for there to be opportunities for research and for advancement within financial services by Bahamians. We are the regional leader right here in the Bahamas. We will be the regional leader in further human capital development within the industry. And that's just not talk, that's a promise. Yes. That will happen. I already have had the discussions necessary with the Minister of Education, who's on board all the way. This is a mission of this government to enhance the skills and development training at all levels of society, to ensure that every Bahamian has an opportunity to advance in the industry they choose to be a part of, Mr. Speaker. That's what it is all about. So the ministry has reviewed the strong programs that are being offered and are putting together a strategy framework to cause for it to be at the university level, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my ministry seeks the creation of an endowment fund for business education within the industry. Continuing education and professional development programs at the College of the Bahamas, soon to be the University of the Bahamas, as critical to the future of Bahamians. My ministry is also actively pursuing international and local exchange programs for Bahamians and internships for Bahamian professionals abroad. To date, the ministry, in collaboration with the Association of International Banks and Trust Companies, has developed a competitive internship program in which bright and academically accomplished students at the College of the Bahamas with leadership potential are provided the internships with sponsoring banks within their institutions. So those interested in College of the Bahamas today,
in employment within and career development within the financial services sector today are in those institutions right now, gaining invaluable work experience at the highest levels and getting paid to do it, Mr. Speaker. Right now, there are 12 College of the Bahamas students in these institutions as a result of the Ministry of Financial Services sponsorship of the Nassau Conference. And I have pledged that that number will double next year, Mr. Speaker. And through collaboration between my ministry and AIBT, and consistent with what we are talking about today with the National Training Agency, we launched a soft skills workshop for these students to provide these students with the advice on professionalism and decorum in the workplace, a positive attitude for constructive advancement in the workplace. However, more importantly, the interns were informed that in the financial services sector, as in life, every job is important, and every job should be performed to the best of your ability. We know that we have a tremendous gap in certain professional services within the institutions. One of those is tax, for instance. We need to develop new areas of education and training in areas we have seen that there are gaps. We're working with a partnership with the Eugene DePuch School of Law to develop courses in comparative tax and securities law to allow for that gap we have identified to be filled so Bahamians can now fill all of those positions, Mr. Speaker. These courses will ensure that there are always legal professionals with the necessary skills to meet clients' needs. Finally, Mr. Speaker, as the Minister of Financial Services, I wish to launch a new program to reward and highlight those financial institutions within the industry, large, medium, and small, which invest in capacity building, especially for Bahamians. The Ministry invites all financial services institutions to submit a plan for their institution of how capacity building will be undertaken. We want to examine the industry best practices of training, and our goal is to partner with an international firm to offer highly sought-after awards for financial sector in achieving human capital development and investment. Mr. Speaker, in preparation for this program, we asked AIBT to conduct a human capital survey. And I would like, Mr. Speaker, at the end of my contribution to table that survey here in this honorable place. I also think it important to present to the Bahamian people the highlights of this survey, Mr. Speaker, so there's a true understanding and appreciation of the Bahamian expertise and skill development within the industry today. Mr. Speaker, 80% of the employees within the industry are Bahamian. At the director and the officer level, the very highest level in the institutions, more than half of the positions are filled by Bahamians. 72% of the companies in the industry have provided overseas internships and foreign language training for employees. Mr. Speaker, these are all positive statistics on how a private-public sector initiative is undertaken for skills development. A good understanding of where we are today, but also provides the backdrop necessary on what we need to do better. How we are to enhance the training and skills development in the industry to increase these statistics. To not let it be more than half, but to let it be 80%, 90% of the chief executives in these institutions are Bahamians. I heard what the member from Golden Gate said earlier, when he said in the financial services sector, these international institutions would like, at the top level, for their persons to be from their jurisdiction. But I might say at the senior level, the CEO, the number one level in the industry, Mr. Speaker, of the sample, 11 are Bahamian, 17 are expatriate. We are on our way. Yes. We are not there. We have identified an area of growth, but we are on our way, Mr. Speaker. We are on our way. Mr. Speaker, within the context of trade, capacity building and training is of utmost importance. We have been collaborating closely with the College of the Bahamas Law Faculty on initiatives which we believe will enhance the country's technical capacity to address matters related to international trade. We saw this as particularly important at this time, given our accession to the World Trade Organization, our implementation of the EPA, and our desire from a policy point of view to cause trade to be a new and thriving element of our economic development model. The first of these initiatives is a 2-credit course, which is going to be offered next month, Mr. Speaker, entitled An Introduction to Law and Policies of the World Trade Organization. My ministry, the College of the Bahamas Law Faculty, and the Continuing Education and Extension Services, as well as the Bahamas Bar Association, have cooperated to create and launch this course for Bahamian professionals, targeting legal professionals and those who have an interest in developing capacity within trade. It was designed to provide insight into the law and the policy of the World Trade Organization, who will be faced with new legal issues in this country once we become that country of a trade hub. It seeks to begin to prepare our professionals in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, we're also in discussions to take this beyond one course, to create a 6-course trade offering within the College of the Bahamas Law Faculty, so we can have a full graduate certificate available in international trade for those Bahamian professionals looking to develop new skills in a new area in which the country is headed, Mr. Speaker. We cannot allow ourselves to develop our country faster than we develop our people. And as we look at new areas to advance our people and our country, especially economically, especially new industry, we must be committed to advancing our people in as quickly, or if not more quickly, than we are advancing our economy. That is a necessity. That is how you cause Bahamians to have a fundamental component and involvement in your economic development as a country. Otherwise, if you do not do it, you do not have the necessary technical capacity to support the industry. And then your only other choice after that is to go and get somebody from away. Haven't we learned that already? Haven't we learned that you have to run technical capacity programs in parallel to what you're trying to do for the development of this country? That is what we're trying to do in the Ministry of Financial Services, especially in areas of highly technical portfolios, but portfolios we believe are fundamental to the economic advancement of our people and our country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Financial Services has also emphasized training of members of the general public on matters related to international trade. In fact, it is something promised within our Charter for Governance, that we will cause for the Bahamian people to be educated, consulted, and when necessary, their skills developed as we advance in international trade. We've targeted trade and services as one of those fundamental components, Mr. Speaker. Why? Well, we are a services-based economy, an economy where countries around the region look for our expertise in matters of tourism, hospitality, and financial services. We must educate our professionals who are at the highest level in the region about these matters and how to leverage their skills in the international community. Mr. Speaker, these are some of the framework and the policy initiatives of what the Ministry of Financial Services is trying to achieve, of what me, as the Member of Parliament for Elizabeth, is trying to bring at the community level for skills training and education development. Even though there is a heavy emphasis on technical skill development, we must do it in conjunction with an institution such as the National Training Agency. Because you could be as skilled as you want if you do not have the other components, the soft skills, the ability to interact, the ability to advance the company that you represent. If they don't go hand in hand, Mr. Speaker, then you are again destined for failure. So this government is approaching it on a comprehensive basis. Skills and education training across the board, from a policy point of view, from a technical point of view, and from an institutional point of view at the National Training Agency, and then as members of Parliament at the constituency level and community point of view, Mr. Speaker. This is the fundamental belief of this government. And in doing so, Mr. Speaker, I, as a representative of Elizabeth, support this progressive and this fundamental and this piece of legislation that is designed for the advancement of our people across the board. And the Ministry of Financial Services will do whatever it needs to do to cause that this is a success and the other education and training initiatives of the government is a success. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair heard you loud and clear. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for East Grand Bahama. The member will also table the document in his past presentation, order that the documents be brought up. In order that the survey lie on the table. Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the proposer of this motion, of this bill, who made some comments this morning that I think you addressed quite well. But I think that it's important that we put things into perspective. And I will only say this, that as the member speaks about conflict resolution and teaching one how to respond to harassment or assault at the extreme end, we must not ever forget that we live in a modern society where women's rights are to be respected and to be acknowledged. And so when a woman tells you... Member for East Grand Bahama. No. You can make, every member has the opportunity to say as they wish in this place, as long as we comply with the rules. Right. And the Chair dealt with that. And so if you're going to make a general statement, that's good and well. Mm-hmm. But when you get specific to the matter at hand, the Chair just, I'm cautioning you. Thank you. I'm just cautioning you. Thank you for the caution, Mr. Speaker. And I am done with the matter, but I just want to make the point that as we talk about training and as we talk about the things that the Minister spoke about, we must also make sure that as a part of our training, that we teach our children, our boys in particular, that they must respect women in the workplace, no matter where they are. And there are consequences for any breach of that, however extreme that may go. And so that's the only thing I wanted to say about that, all right? Because we got the impression this morning that there was some kind of one side to this. Right. No, I'm done with that, Mr. Speaker. Member for Golden Gates, point of order, addressing...
I'm addressing what the member said just now. He addressed...
Member for East Grand Bahama.
He addressed in a general way how we must respect the rights of individuals and all that. And he sought to import what I said earlier into whatever it is he is trying to accomplish now. My message, Mr. Speaker, to the kids of this nation is no matter how people offend you verbally, you do not physically attack them. That's my message. Do not, I don't care what it is, there's no justification, none. Where somebody can say something to you that you are offended by, somebody can put their arms around you, and you have a right to defend yourself no matter what, and assault them physically, Mr. Speaker? Something's wrong with that.
Your point is taken. Thank you, Honourable Member. Thank you. Member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, you know, to make the point clear, because I think the member...
The Chair, prefer you leave that alone and move on.
I'll leave it alone, Mr. Speaker, because the point, I think, has already been made, and the public has already made up their minds about the situation. Yes. But again, We must respect this personal space of individuals. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to offer congratulations to the team from Catholic High School who placed first in the national sec meet competition on the west coast of the United States this past week, as well as the third place finisher, Bishop Michael Eldon High School. The sec meet program is a science based competition where the kids engage in a mousetrap competition based around design and performance of the mousetraps, and of participating throughout the United States. The Catholic High School came out first. Congratulations. Mr. Speaker, here I have a copy of a bill called the National Training Agency Bill 2013. In my left hand, I have an official invitation to the launch of this National Training Agency on Friday. I think the minister said earlier that it's going to be pushed back to July 15th now. But the point is, Mr. Speaker, how presumptuous that we would come here on Wednesday with an official launch already announced for Friday. I'm sure the people of the Bahamas would have expected that their representatives, either side, would have at least had the opportunity to have debated the bill, to put in their input, and if any amendments, as we have now learned there are to be, would be properly vetted, discussed, and put forward. But be that as it may, Mr. Speaker, it's obvious that the government has already made up its mind. And that's fine. As they say, members, the government, the opposition has its say, members, government has its way. But nonetheless, I speak on behalf of the residents of East Grand Bahamas. If only for the record.
Yes, speak for the record.
Mr. Speaker, I confess that I do not see how this bill enhances creativity and innovation in vocational and technical education. I listened to the member for Grand Bahama earlier and to the member for Elizabeth just now, and I listened to them very eloquently speak about the initiatives that they have undertaken in their various constituencies and ministries with respect to the approaches that they've made to industry and programs they have put in place to affect training. And as they were speaking, I was considering this bill and wondering, what is it that this bill is going to do that they have not already addressed? The minister or the member from Elizabeth outlined an impressive list of educational opportunities that he is engaged in. The member for Pine Ridge talked about how he's consulted with all of the industry stakeholders in Grand Bahama and how he and they, along with the Port Authority and whoever else, and the government, the immigration minister, the labor minister, have all sat down and they've decided that they need to engage in these kind of skills training. But that's the purpose of this agency, according to what I read in it. And so the question to me is, what are we doing? Here we are, talking about an agency that is going to require personnel, space, other operating costs, to coordinate, I suppose is the best word, an activity that seems to be already in train. I don't have any reason to believe that the members are not telling the truth and that they're not being effective at what they are doing. And so why do we need another agency? Why do we need another bureaucracy to do that? Mr. Speaker, without contradiction, in the past 30 years, there's been very little progress made in the delivery of education in the Bahamas. We continue to do the same things year after year while expecting different results. We call our investments in school buildings to graduate more and more children incapable of meeting today's standards an investment in education and our future. I am of the view that successive governments, Seabreeze, have not had the vision or the intestinal fortitude necessary to move the country forward in the education and training of its people. Successive governments have decried the lack of skilled Bahamians. Yet, very little has been done to educate and train scores of young Bahamians marking time in our schools. Schools whose primary focus seems to be teaching of the country's national examinations, at which we are also failing, despite what the Ministry of Education disseminates for public consumption. The fact is, most teachers in both public and, I dare say, private high schools cater primarily to students who are capable of passing the BGCSE exams. Because in their minds, the pass-fail rate in this examination is the only way their competence as teachers will be judged by the ministry and by the public. The reality is, though, that only 15% or less of our high school leavers, and I intentionally say leavers because I'm told that less than 60% actually graduate, move on to tertiary education. The other 85% are looking to enter the job market with a subpar education and little or no marketable skills. With this in mind, it is beyond comprehension that there are no technical vocational high schools in this country. Is there a conspiracy to keep our people uneducated and unskilled so that they forever are dependent upon the government of the day? I am told, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order. The chair recognizes the member for Marthorne.
Mr. Speaker, the member for East Grand Bahama made the point that there are no technical and vocational schools in the Bahamas. I made the point during my contribution, Mr. Speaker, to point out that C.C. Sweeting is a magnet school for technical vocational training, which was funded through the IDB, through a loan organized and arranged by the former Minister of Education, Mr. Alfred Sayers. And there are other high schools within the Bahamas that are not fully vocational but are well on their way to being technical vocational high schools. And so that statement is incorrect. Yes, we do have a long way to go, but the point is we do have a magnet school upon which we have seen great success in which to give us the authority and give us the reason to know that we need to continue to expand it in the Bahamas.
Thank you, honourable member.
And would also know some of the best examples and the first examples of technical vocational schools are actually in Grand Bahama. St. George's being probably the prime example of it, which is where many of the technical vocational curriculums were developed and areas of study. And today.
Thank you, honourable member.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Continue.
And I'll address that in a minute. But as I understand it, and I know he was going to talk about the C.C. Sweeting as soon as he got up.
The member.
But the reality is, as I understand it today, and he can correct me, that program, that career academy, as it was designed to be, is woefully underperforming or not prepared at this stage for its intended purpose, as I understand it.
He has given his opinion. The chair received it as an opinion that...
It continues. I don't know why East Grand Bahama continues to do this. There is a saying that an uncle of mine had one time ago when referring to people who continue to talk things they knew nothing about. He used to always say, he knows not what he knows not. Right, Mr. Speaker? And the truth of the matter is that C.C. Sweeting has been performing extremely well. In fact, this year, they had the top BGCSE results in that district. They won the Hugh Campbell Championship. They won the track and field championships, Mr. Speaker. We are seeing tremendous improvement in that school, and attendance is high, dropout rate is down, because it is offering programs, Mr. Speaker, that the students find relevant and they are enjoying. And so that, wherever he got that information from, whoever he got that from, totally wrong. Has nothing to do with truth and facts, Mr. Speaker. Nothing. I can assure you that. That program has given us the impetus and the confidence to know now that that is the right model moving forward, Mr. Speaker. All the evidence is there. It is clear they are performing well, not only academically, but also in sports, in cooking, in hospitality, you just name it, woodwork, electrical engineering, across the board, Mr. Speaker. They are performing well, and we have seen the line of improvement going up every year, Mr. Speaker, so it's totally not true. And so I don't know where he got the information from, but I can assure him, as a minister, there's no truth to that.
Member for East Grand Bahama. Thank you, Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker.
We so advise.
Mr. Speaker, you know, he's the minister, and I'm sure he knows of what he speaks. I can tell you what I understand, what I believe, what I have heard, okay? And he indicates very, very clearly that the BGSE's results are doing well. That's beautiful. I don't have any difficulty with that. I think says so itself. My point is, we're talking about vocational education. That's what I'm talking about. All right? So, anyway, Mr. Speaker, in Grand Bahama, we have a stable industrial sector and a growing reputation in the ship care industry. Yet, we have no high schools focused on providing the skills necessary to build the local capacity needed to sustain growth in the sector by Bahamians. Indeed, thus far, we choose to rely on private sector partners to do the jobs for us. And various companies are doing their part. I think I heard earlier the Minister for Grand Bahama speak about the partnership with Borco and the Technical Training Institute that's currently at the old Hawksville High School site. The Grand Bahama Shipyard, who's doing a tremendous job, despite what is said from time to time in this place. Doing a tremendous job in training Bahamians. And there are some challenges. And I think somebody had mentioned it earlier. I think that the Minister of Labor, Golden Gate, may have mentioned it. One of the problems that they have is that they not necessarily can guarantee continuous employment, because it is a seasonal kind of business. And that presents a different set of challenges, because Bahamians don't necessarily understand that. They want the job, and when the project ends, they expect to continue their employment, regardless of whether there's a ship there or not. So that's a different kind of challenge. But the fact is, Mr. Speaker, that most companies are not here in the Bahamas because they want to train our people or they want to be charitable to us. They're here to make a profit. We have an asset that they can benefit from, and our take from that is that they contribute to the economy, they employ our people, and they train our people. But our responsibility is to provide a cadre of individuals who are capable of being trained. And that is kind of where we've been falling down on the job. Providing the input so that when these industries come in, that they have a resource to work with. Mr. Speaker, it is a fallacy to believe that every student is capable of passing the BGCSE exam, or for that matter, that every student is academically inclined. This is not to say that not all of them are capable of being productive citizens and contributing to our society. In fact, the opposite is true. It is my opinion that the majority of these students are just not being given the opportunity to utilize their God-given talent in careers that are not considered academic. I've spoken about this in this place before, Mr. Speaker, but wouldn't it be better that a student leaves high school certified in a specific career rather than to leave school with a piece of paper stating that he attended for 12 years? This certification would make him or her readily employable and empower him or her to become an entrepreneur after a period of apprenticeship. We must realize by now that the current educational path that we are pursuing will not produce the highly skilled and qualified individuals that a developing Bahamas requires. So in this 40th year of independence, we need to stop the whining, the political posturing, and grandstanding. And as this bill seeks to do, and get serious about the promotion and the implementation of technical vocational education, so that going forward we have a cadre of skilled Bahamians who are capable of participating fully in our economy. Mr. Speaker, the Minister just mentioned Jack Hayward and St. George's high schools in Grand Bahama as being St. George's as vocational, having a vocational component. Some 32 years ago, Mr. Speaker, when I attended the great Hawksbill High School in Grand Bahama, many of the programs contemplated by this bill and in the BTVI bill already existed and were in practice. That school, which I contend was decades ahead of its time, was set up to provide specific vocational training that was identified during that period as being the future of Grand Bahama. And many excellent technicians were graduated from those programs. In fact, I dare say that the electronics program, for instance, provided the majority of today's mid-level BTC technicians. The hotel and catering program produced many persons in the forefront of the tourism industry. Auto mechanics, sewing, commerce, and others. It seems to me that this bill seeks to reinvent the wheel, Mr. Speaker. Just ask Mr. Thompson, the current Undersecretary of the Ministry of Grand Bahama, or Mr. Tracy Strawn, or Mr. E.J. Bowe, former principals of Hawksbill. We've been there, and we've done this. We don't need further assessments and studies. We need action, Mr. Speaker. Yes. Commitment and resources to make it happen. Yes. We need to determine who we are, yes, what we desire to be, yes, and focus on our long-term objectives, yes, instead of unsustainable, feel-good projects, yes, geared to no other purpose than re-election. Re-election? Mr. Speaker, we just finished election. When BTVI was originally set up, it was designed to be that institution specifically geared towards providing vocational skills for those individuals who may not have excelled in academics. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the students were actually given a stipend to attend the various programs. And I think there's some talk about stipends in this program for the training institution, I believe, or the company taking on the student. And that program was very successful, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, with budgetary pressures, those stipends were discontinued, and the program was altered a little bit. By who? Away from its core mandate of technical competencies and evaluations into a more theoretical sort of academic focus. One, I am smart. I'm trying to acknowledge numbers. One, to ensure that the students who are competent in basic education and math necessary to facilitate preparation. And secondly, because the equipment and updated technology is just not in place to do the cutting-edge technical, practical training, Mr. Speaker. Somewhere along the way, BTVI seems to have lost its way and has been relegated to the back room as some second-tier institution. Just as some of us think of people who work with their hands as being somehow less than those of us in the professions. we've disregarded BTVI and the skills training it can produce.
Absolutely.
This is indeed unfortunate, as the program was, I believe, still is to an extent, so very relevant. So again, Mr. Speaker, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. As a matter of fact, it's interesting to note that Ms. Marcel, who the members opposite speak about in such glowing terms, actually, she did work did some work at BTVI many years ago, when my father was there, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Industrial Training Center, they called it back then.
Yes.
And one of the things they did was, again, exactly what this training agency is supposedly going to be set up to do. Manpower assessments, identifying
Nothing new under the
needs.
sun, my friend.
Much work was done, and as I understand it, volumes of data was gathered. And protection of skills. So here we are again with another bureaucratic agency.
Another one.
Aimed at giving the impression that we are now going to do something different. When I read this document, I came away with nothing new or innovative in respect to programs or training to be initiated. What I saw was the addition of another department or agency
That's exactly.
with all the attendant personnel and costs. Unnecessary expenses being added to the national debt to create jobs for a few. This government says it's reducing the recurrent spending deficit.
My foot.
Yet it continues to add departments, programs, and rehire personnel of suspect long-term value to the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, would it not be better to invest in the trained personnel and equipment actually needed by BTVI critically today to make it effective and beneficial to the students that are enrolled?
Common sense ain't common.
Today, and I won't speak about Nassau because I haven't been down there, but in Grand Bahama, auto mechanics, welding, they do not have the equipment that they need to be as effective as they can.
You understand?
As a result, the primary trainer of welders today is actually a private institution that's getting support from the Borcos and the shipyards. That's unfortunate. We're talking about creating a bureaucratic level when we haven't addressed the equipment that's necessary and the teachers, the instructors that are necessary in order to carry out the training. Again, wouldn't it be better that we invest in the students than in an agency? We are adding this agency, and we're also investing $4 million on a project in Andres, so-called agricultural school. A school where no sustainable plans have been articulated other than a dream of a successful farm for hundreds of young farmers. No plans for land allocation, equipment acquisition, or market support. Meanwhile, we're cutting BTVI's budget by 18%. And we say we're serious about vocational education.
On a point of order.
Member rises on a point of order. The clock will be stopped. The chair recognizes the member from
I think we
Marathon.
went through the budget debate. We went through the head-to-head. I made it very clear that there was no cut to the BTVI budget. In fact, when you looked at it, you would see that there's provision there actually to hire more persons. There were reallocation of the national insurance contributions and the reallocations of certain other ministries within the government, but there was no cutting of the budget. In fact, it was increased with regard to the hiring of teachers. I went through that during the budget, and so for the member to come up here now and say this again when I corrected it during the budget is just untrue, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member. Member for East Grand Bahama.
The BTVI budget was cut, Mr. Speaker, by 18%. The BTC negotiating team, in its latest pronouncement, says that the sale of BTC was a bad deal because we sold the submarine cable. Okay? But what were we going to do with that cable, Mr. Speaker, if we retained it? Especially if we don't invest in the technical skills necessary to take advantage of it.
Members,
Wasting time again, Mr. Speaker. And if we could spend as much money and time and energy focusing on this instead of chasing a bad prospective policy, maybe we can get somewhere in progressing the knowledge-based economy such infrastructure will require and can benefit from. Maybe if we allow the Bahamians to share in the equity of that corporation, we and they can benefit from the same infrastructure without the attendant cost.
members,
We continue to chase the cart instead of the horse, Mr. Speaker. The horse being skills and education that will take us somewhere. The cart being BTC's infrastructure that will get us nowhere if we don't have the knowledge, skills, and manpower to use it.
Speak.
Mr. Speaker, the bill speaks to the agency.
member for East Grand Bahama. The member rises on a point of order. The chair recognizes the member for Golden Gates.
Mr. Speaker, I've been in telecommunications business for almost 20 years.
The point of
And
order.
if you check with most telecommunications companies all over the world, they don't own infrastructure. They lease time. And so when you see these cell towers up all over as you drive to the United States, they're not owned by individual carriers. They're owned by one entity, and all of the carriers lease time. And the same thing could have been done here in the Bahamas. When we had the original submarine cable between here on West Palm Beach with AT&T, all of the entities leased time on that submarine cable. And the same thing could have happened with fiber optic cable. You lease time, you own the cable, you lease it.
Thank you, honorable member. Members, member for East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker,
You may continue. Members, chair wants to hear East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure it was a point of order, but whatever it was, he gets no argument with me about leasing the submarine cable or time on the cable. I have no argument with that. The point, though, is why should we own it? Why do we need to own it? Why don't we give the Bahamian people the 49%?
Yes.
So that they can benefit from it.
Yes, the 9%.
That's the point, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the bill speaks to the agency preparing and implementing plans for workforce vocational training. It appears that its role is to research and identify training as necessary. And as I said before, this is a role that has been done by various agencies for years. The member for Pine Ridge and the member for Elizabeth already spoke to it. BTVI does it. In order to remain relevant, they must do it. College of the Bahamas does it. And in order to remain relevant, they must do it. So what are we doing, Mr. Speaker, but creating another bureaucratic level? Mr. Speaker, the agency is to engage in activities geared towards increasing capacity of individuals. But yet, as has been stated in here already, this agency is not a training institution. It is a certifying institution at best. But when it comes to that, we have the College of the Bahamas, we have the Ministry of Education, we have the Ministry of Labor. Why can't we utilize the services in those agencies to perform these functions? Why can't we take the same individual that we want to coordinate this training and place them in one of these agencies, in one of these ministries, eliminating a whole range of costs as a result? So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, being from Grand Bahama, the industrial capital of the Bahamas, I certainly recognize the needs for further development of our technical and vocational training standards, and the need to identify the skills necessary to further develop industry and capacity. I believe, however, that with resources and commitment on the part of the government, we can fulfill that mandate within the scope of the BTVI, BAIC, COB, and the continuing education, professional development courses, and the other existing educational institutions, training institutions. In so doing, we not only fulfill this mandate, but we avoid dilution of the national focus on technical training and contain the cost associated with such. I would much rather see the government, Mr. Speaker, as I said before, invest $300,000 in getting the welding equipment, in getting the automotive testing equipment, in getting the sewing machine, industrial sewing machines, and the other technically skilled persons who can teach these skills, along with the soft skills, along with the IT skills that will take us into the next development and big thing in our development, than to talk about funding another agency to say we have one.
That's right.
Before I take my seat, Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to recite a poem that was sent to me by an anonymous Bahamian poet entitled Technical and Vocational Education in the 242. And it goes, "It seems as if the country is going straight to hell. 4,000 students will soon hear the final bell. Please tell me where they will find some work, and all they've learned is the dance hall twerk. They have no skills. There's very little they can do. They'll be looking for a job somewhere in the 242. With a piece of paper that says, I just finished school, I'm trained to do nothing, and I'm feeling like a fool. There's a lot of blame that can be passed around. The colonial mindset is still in control of this town. Our children are encouraged to wear a white collar. Never mind that most of them will never be a scholar. The Ministry of Education acts as if they have no clue the role they play in making this country safe for you. Educating and training our children is the best place to start. A few technical and vocational schools would really be smart. We cannot continue to educate as we've always done. We will never make progress, and the battle will never be won. The country is dependent on the changes that we make. Let's give our children a chance, for their future is at stake. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. And that poem, of course, you would recognize that you have adopted the words of that poem as your words. Very well. Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Seabreeze.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on the great constituents of the Seabreeze constituency to give my brief contribution to this National Training Agency Bill 2013. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the people of Seabreeze for, first of all, electing me to be in this place, and I can't say that often enough when I stand to my feet to represent them here. Mr. Speaker, I have to say that I'm very disappointed in the fact that the member for East Grand Bahama would adopt the words of a poem which talks about and which basically denigrates Bahamian students. Mr. Speaker, there's no denying that we have our problems in this country. There's no denying that we have our problems.
The members. Thank you for yielding. The Chair recognizes the member for East Grand Bahama.
I don't know where the member would get the impression that I somehow denigrated Bahamian students. The reality, the point is, Mr. Speaker, it was a poem, and it is an artistic, creative expression. There is no such thing. I do not believe. I never conveyed any denigration to any student. Never did. I read a poem. And if the member can't understand that, then we aren't.
Members. The Chair is quite able to adjudicate the matter. Member, the Chair made members.
Making your mind.
The chair. This is the reason why the Chair asked the honourable member that reading the poem on the floor of this chamber, indicates that you've accepted the words as your own. And so separating yourself from it then becomes impossible. If not, it's following the rules. And that's why, this is exactly why the chair asked.
With due respect, Mr. Speaker.
This is exactly why the chair asked. No, member, take your seat. Member, take your seat. Let me finish. This is why the chair asked. Now, for the member for Seabreeze, the member for Seabreeze may not is using some wide range in saying that you are denigrating the students. That is not, certainly we understand, the chair understands that that was not your intent to denigrate, but the words are your own. So I'll just advise the member for Seabreeze to not state, to impugn, necessarily state that the member denigrates the students. You could state your point of view. But you...
I think it was probably about the first 3 lines of that poem, which talks about how Bahamian students are failing. And as far as I'm concerned, when you make a broad statement and you paint a brush, you didn't indicate some, or you didn't indicate any particular class of students. He talked about Bahamian students. And so as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Speaker, when you speak in those terms, you are denigrating Bahamian students.
And you are very well. Continue with your presentation.
And I will continue to say it. And denigrating Bahamian students, denigrating their parents, denigrating their teachers, denigrating every aspect of education in this country.
Members, the chair is not going to allow this any further.
Exactly, because the member is, in fact, trying to imply or to impute an intention to me, which he has no basis to do.
I go on what you read.
I read a poem which words I accepted as an expression, as a poem.
Very well.
And so where she's going with this, Mr. Speaker, it's really unreasonable.
Very well.
Really ought to encourage her.
The chair quite understands your concerns, and the chair will now recognize the member for Seabreeze to continue. And
when you read something and then run away from it.
Mr. Speaker, when we read things in this House and we adopt them as our words, I have...
Member, just be careful to speak to your opinion. To the matter and not personalize it. As long as you do that, you're within the rules. Members, the chair is talking above. The chair wants to hear the member for Seabreeze. Member for Seabreeze.
Mr. Speaker, I sat here and I listened to the very eloquent poetry, which in the first 3 to 4 lines, as far as I am concerned, were very denigrating to Bahamian students in particular. And, Mr. Speaker, when you asked the member whether or not he adopted the words as his own, he very eagerly and boldly said he did. So if those are his words, I have to accept that that's what they are. And, Mr. Speaker, I totally condemn those words, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
he knows not what he knows not.
Mr. Speaker, I have heard so much of it.
Knows not what he
so
knows
much
not.
of it over the years.
You got no proof.
So much of it. And Mr. Speaker, if we look in this House, we have a rich diversity, cross-section of the Bahamian populace. All of us have been educated, most of us, up to a certain stage under the Bahamian educational system. Can we continue to always just condemn it and say that there's no good that comes out of it? Yes. I totally reject that, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
I reject that for myself. I reject that. And now, Mr. Speaker, also, before I get to the meat of my contribution, I want to just mention something about BTC. BTC was 100% owned by the Bahamian people. 100%. The FNM government, in their wisdom, decided that they were going to sell 51% to another entity. 51%. The last time I checked, my maths told me that 51% gave majority share interest to a foreign entity and left the Bahamian people 49. That means that the foreign entity is in control. All of those opposite all of those supported it. They supported it. And so I don't think that we have any obligation, Mr. Speaker, and I think rather it would be unwise for us to take any advice from that crew about what we should do with BDC.
Member, I would rather you not say crew.
Yeah, those members.
The chair would rather you members, honorable members.
No advice from them, Mr. Speaker. And now, Mr. Speaker, to get to the meat of my contribution. Mr. Speaker, this National Training Agency bill will be of great assistance to the scores of persons in the constituency that I represent who have been actively pursuing gainful employment and have called or visited me to assist them in this regard. Many of them I have had to disappoint because the fact of the matter is that even the government, Mr. Speaker, has limitations on hiring. The private sector is only now recovering from the serious economic crisis experienced over the last 4 years of F&M governance. And, Mr. Speaker, they are, at this point, a little tentative about what they should be doing, and they're sort of observing the lay of the land, so to speak. Mr. Speaker, it's a pity that advantage wasn't taken of the hiatus in employment that was caused by the crisis from 2008 coming forward. But the fact is that the 52-week program, which the F&M put in place, was really only a political ploy. And the timing of that program bears it out. Now, I heard that during the debate there was some talk about this program being in effect from 2009. But, Mr. Speaker, my maths tell me again, I have to do maths, and you know, Mr. Speaker, I really ain't good at maths. But 52 weeks is 1 year, and if it's a 52-week program and they put it in place before they left, it couldn't have been 2009 when it was implemented. Couldn't possibly be. And the program only finished in 2012. 52 weeks was a finite period. 52 weeks was a finite period. And some finished in 2013, so it couldn't be 2009.
Member for CB's, if you could yield. The chair recognizes the member for Long Island.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to, for the clarification of this place, the program was staggered, Mr. Speaker. Not everyone was engaged at the same time. That's why not everyone was disengaged at the same time.
Very well. Thank you, honorable member. Member for Seabreeze.
The point I'm trying to make, Mr. Speaker, is that all of them happened during the last year. And it happened right before the general election. Right before the general election. They had done such a horribly dismal job of running this country that they had to come up with some bright scheme to try to see if they could get the people to vote for them. So the 52-week program was what they came up with.
Yeah, and I had $23 million.
Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the very many people weren't fooled. They weren't fooled at all. And so at the end of the day, they saw out of office. The 52-week program was a failure.
North Abaco was the worst.
Failure.
North Abaco had 15% of the voting population. 15% of the voters in North Abaco was on the 52-week program.
Mr. Speaker.
15%. Over 400 in North Abaco was on the 52-week program, more than 15% of the voting population.
The 52-week program was good.
God is good. That's true? Yeah, that's dead true. God is good, though.
The 52-week program was ill-conceived.
God is good.
It was rushed.
15% was on the 52-week. I telling you.
And it had absolutely no structure.
Over 400.
It wasn't even costed out properly, Mr. Speaker, when they were so eager to get this election ploy going. You know, they come to the House and they say, $24 million, that's what they could spend. $24 million, no. And you know, PLP was happy to do it, going to employ some people. We didn't agree with the structure of the program or anything like that. But we voted, okay. They're going to employ some people. The Bahamian people is our #1 priority. So let's vote with this for this. $24 million. Well, lo and behold, Mr. Speaker, at the end of all of this, and you heard the member for Cat Island tell some really tales about what they did to him in Cat Island with the program.
On election day.
We hearing from North Abaco what they did there. And I think they did some other creative things in some other constituencies.
Oh, my God. Oh, my
well,
God.
at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, the 24 doubled. Almost doubled. It became 48. In fact, it doubled. So somebody math was off again. It was off at 52 weeks. It was off at BDC. And it was off between 24 million and 48. They end up being twice the amount. Mr. Speaker, I wonder how many people that 24-week, that 52-week program really employed for that $48 million. And Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, not one worker has a certificate. Not one worker has a certificate that they could rely on to bolster their viability in the job market.
$48 million later.
After $48 million, Mr. Speaker. But, you know, they over there telling us, giving us advice about what to do.
Yeah,
now, you really think, Mr. Speaker, we should take advice from somebody, from people who did that? I don't think so, Mr. Speaker.
No.
I think we need to rely on our own judgment.
Yes, we're creating jobs right now.
Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker,
hundreds and thousands of jobs.
In the 52-week program, nevertheless, the PRP government retained many of the people who run the program, because again, the people are our priority. And these people will be the beneficiaries of on-the-job training in the various ministries, departments, and agencies of the Bahamas government. This was less than ideal, but it is what it is, Mr. Speaker. However, it is incumbent on this government, this PRP government, led by Mr. Perry, the Prime Minister Perry Gladstone Christie, the member for Centerville. It is this government which is going to make better use of the country's scarce resources.
That's right, yes.
This National Training Agency is a sustainable training program. And when you leave this program, Mr. Speaker, you'll have a certificate in your hand. You'll have something in paper. Paper, Mr. Speaker. You'll have a certificate in your hand that is internationally accepted and is proof that you have undergone a course of training commensurate with the profession that you chose to train in. You'll be able to use that certificate in the Bahamas, the Caribbean, the United States, Europe, and many other places because, Mr. Speaker, the certificate will be from a recognized agency, City and Guilds of London, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the life of me, I can't figure out, and we've spent the whole day here debating, and most of the side opposite have given their contributions. And what I've heard is that they actually, Mr. Speaker, are objecting to this training program. Mr. Speaker, they are objecting to this national training program for the people of the Bahamas. I can't wrap my mind around that, Mr. Speaker. How could you possibly object to something that is going to benefit the Bahamian people from now until? How could you object to it?
Make us more competitive. All our capital.
Make us more competitive. Train our people for the jobs which we are, and you know we can have plenty of jobs.
Oh yeah.
We can have plenty of jobs, Mr. Speaker.
Plenty jobs right away.
Mr. Speaker, my heart is singing.
Yes, that's it.
Mr. Speaker, we got to train our people for these jobs.
Yes.
We got to empower our people and make sure that they're able to take advantage of what is coming, Mr. Speaker.
That's right,
We got to ready them.
That's right.
We can't slack our ride, Mr. Speaker.
No.
And we can't listen to the other side who objecting to it either.
No, sir.
We must proceed. We must move forward.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, the unemployment rate tells us that we have to move ahead. It's presently at an unacceptable rate for us. I think it's hovering around 14%. And Mr. Speaker, it's even worse among the youth. But you know, Mr. Speaker, it's important that we slay this dragon, this dragon of unemployment. The only way we can do it, Mr. Speaker, is if we're proactive.
Yes.
And that's what we're doing.
Yes, hope.
We are proactive.
Yes.
Okay? We wait until 2016, Mr. Speaker. To put in place a 52-week program. Mr. Speaker, we acting now. Mr. Speaker. Yes. 2017 come, Mr. Speaker, our people can be right
Yes, that's right. They can be trained.
Mr. Speaker, we have the Minister our Minister of State for Investment and our Prime Minister talk about all of the wonderful opportunities that are on the table for consideration. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, that's what you call visionary leadership.
Yes.
Visionary leadership. This is a new dimension, Mr. Speaker. It is, Mr. it is important, Mr. Speaker, that we restore the confidence of our people in them as a workforce. I'm not here to denigrate my people. I know we got some shortcomings, Mr. Speaker. We all do.